Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 4 of the series. Chapter 43, Chapter 43, Chapter 43, Robbing the Path 1. Chapter 43, Chapter 43, Robbing the Path 1. What a dumbass. Chen 30 mumbled under his breath. Spotting what seemed like a man and a deer in the distance, he quickly whispered, "They're coming, they're coming." He shoved Chen Lulu, "Hurry up and get your staff. We'll knock out Jiang Sanlang first, then take the deer." Tu Xiong, peering out from behind the bamboo, spoke nervously, "What about that little kid? Shall we knock her out too?" He worried that one blow might smash the child's skull apart. Chen 30 gave him a look. "Knock out for what? She's a kid. Just gag her. We could sell her in the county. She should be worth a few taels of silver. No one would care too much about a bastard child, even if she went missing from the Jiang family." As for why they did not directly kill Jiang Sanlang, Chen 30 had his own considerations. Killing a man wasn't the same as stealing a deer. Murder came with a price, it required paying with your own life. But stealing a deer, as long as no one recognized them, it would be no big deal. What Chen 30 sought was wealth, not retribution. Tu Xiong nodded and quickly covered his face with a prepared thick cloth, leaving only his eyes visible. Turning his head, he saw Chen 30 and Chen Lulu also covering their faces, with wooden sticks in their hands, ready to go out. Tu Xiong felt a bit excited, as this felt thrilling, just as hunting in the mountains. The thrill of preying on the unsuspecting, the boiling blood, was quite stimulating. Outside the bamboo grove, Jiang Sanlang paused and whispered to his daughter, "Bao Bao, let's not go any further, let's turn back and head to town." Once back in town, he could find some familiar folks to escort his daughter and him back to the village. Yingbao, seeing her father's nervous face, immediately realized something was going to happen. She glanced towards the bamboo grove and saw 3 sneaky figures coming this way. Yingbao pulled the rein, prompting Yu to turn around. As if sensing her intent, Yu immediately turned around and bolted back the way they had come. Jiang Sanlang also followed, constantly looking back to keep track of the 3 figures. Seeing their prey trying to escape, Chen 30 quickly signaled Tu Xiong and Chen Lulu, "They're trying to escape, hurry up and intercept them. Once they escape, our chance is gone." With that, he took the lead and rushed after Jiang Sanlang and Yingbao. Jiang Sanlang swiftly instructed his daughter, "Quickly go to the town and find the midwife. Or go to Rongji Pharmacy and look for Dr. Li. I'll hold them off, quick." As he spoke, he smacked Yu's backside hard, urging it to speed up. Yu hastened its pace, speeding up in an instant, and Yingbao looked back at her father, calling anxiously, "Dad, hurry up and follow. Dad." Jiang Sanlang had turned around, gripping his felling axe firmly as he eyeballed the approaching men. They were now right in front of him and without a word, they immediately raised their sticks to strike. With his short axe, Jiang Sanlang had to get close to harm them. But they swiftly pummeled down on his head and body with their sticks. Despite evading repeatedly, he couldn't completely dodge them. A blow landed on his head, causing his skull to crack with blood flowing out. Furious, Jiang Sanlang lunged at the men who struck the hardest, gripping his long stick, and launched a strike with his axe. The men quickly backpedaled, avoiding the axe, dropping his stick in the process. "Kill him. Damn it." Chen 30 cursed, "Strike him dead. Let's not worry about the brat coming back." Tu Xiong and Chen Lulu pushed forward, raising their sticks high above their heads and swung down hard on Jiang Sanlang's head. "Dad!" A mournful shout rang out behind them, accompanied by a flash of frosty light. With a slashing sound, blood splattered as a long gash was slit open on Tu Xiong's back. His body stiffened and he fell to the ground. Another icy blade struck Chen Lulu's arm, cutting deep to the bone. Pain shot through him and, with a scream, he fell to the ground holding the sickle. Chen 30 was stunned, not even getting a chance to figure out what happened to his accomplices. Jiang Sanlang's axe slashed his arm. "Ah!" Chen San, with a shriek of horror, clutched his arm and screamed, "Murder! Murder!" and tried to run away. Jiang Sanlang leapt forward, hit Chen San with the handle of his knife, leaving Chen 30 unconscious on the ground. Bao Bao, Jiang Sanlang managed to stand up, fighting off dizziness, and quickly ran towards his daughter. Ying Bao, who had fallen off the deer, was trembling all over, her face covered with teardrops. She was still clutching the sickle that was deeply embedded in Chen Lu's arm. She extended her hands to her father. "Daddy, Bao Bao is scared." Jiang Sanlang tightly held his daughter, and after ensuring that she was not hurt, reassured her in a soft voice, "Don't be scared, Bao Bao. Daddy is here." Just then, a donkey cart galloped forward. Chen Yin, the second son of Chen Suanjing, jumped off the cart and quickly ran towards them. "Sanlang, what's going on? How did this happen?" He had seen the fight from afar, saw a deer and a child involved, hence he knew who was fighting, and had rushed over. Jiang Sanlang wiped the blood off his face. "These three are robbers, I got them." "Robbers?" Chen Yin looked down at the three men. All three were hooded with a kerchief over their faces. Two of them were huddled on the ground wailing, one was laying there, lifeless, with his arm bleeding. "Indeed, they are robbers. Let's take them to the town, Li Jing will handle them." Chen Yin unraveled their kerchiefs, and upon recognizing who the perpetrators were, he snorted in disdain. They are really seeking their own doom. Technically, Chen Lu had some ties with his family, yet he had robbed his own fellow villagers, which was even lower than pigs and dogs. Jiang Sanlang hugged his daughter tightly, and bent down to pull out the sickle from Chen Lu's arm, placed it back in his basket, and whispered, "Bao Bao, be good, don't talk to anyone without thinking. Daddy will handle everything." Ying Bao nodded, and stuffed a piece of medicinal herb into her father's mouth. "Daddy, eat this." Jiang Sanlang was confused, yet he took what his daughter had put in his mouth. Ying Bao then applied some of the medicinal herb sap to her father's head wound, making her feel relieved. Earlier, when she had seen these men aiming to strike her father's head, her mind went blank, and she darted forward, pulling a sickle from her storage and attacking. Luckily her father was safe, otherwise, she would never let them off. 2 hours later, the three ruffians were tied up and brought to Li Jing's house. Son Li Jing had a stern face as he ordered the peasants to reveal their faces. As their kerchiefs were removed, the gathering crowd gasped in surprise. It turned out that the bandits were Tu Xiong, the youngest son of the butcher Tuda, Chen San, who was a notorious character in the town, and Chen Lu, son of Chen Ergu of the Shichen village. These three were notorious in the town, especially Chen San and Chen Lu, who were despised because they stole and harassed widows. Sun Lijing was furious as he watched them, trembling in anger. Unbelievably, within his jurisdiction, these local townsmen had become bandits. This, he couldn't bear. If people learned of their identities, they would think that this place was infested with bandits. If these good-for-nothings stole a little or caused a tiny ruckus, he could let it go, as these were minor issues. As long as the villagers didn't press charges, he wouldn't interfere. But now, they had attacked and injured people on the road, he couldn't tolerate such actions. Summon their village heads. Sun Lijing shouted, call their family heads and warranters too, summon them all. As per his instructions, when one person commits a crime, 10 neighbors are held accountable. As Lijing, today he would make an example of them. Yes, several villagers ran to fetch them. In less than 2 hours, a large crowd was brought in. The wife of Tuda, in tears, pounced on her son's body, smearing her hands with his blood, and screamed. Sun Lijing looked annoyed and ordered the peasants to drag her away. He turned to the village heads, these 3 are from your village. Now, they are robbing and injuring good people. There are witnesses and evidence, what do you suggest we should do? Chapter 44, Chapter 44, Chapter 44, Disposal. Chapter 44, Chapter 44, Disposal. The 3 village heads were also quite angry at this moment. The emergence of such people in their own village was a disgrace to the whole village, and above all, it trampled over their dignity as village heads. What does this indicate? It indicates their incompetence and unworthiness of their positions. The 3 of them fist saluted, saying, deal with them as you see fit, Lijing. As for their family members, punish them according to the law. We have no complaints. As for their family members, punish them according to the law. We have no complaints. Serving as village heads meant that they had a certain standing in the village and therefore, they could be connected with these villagers by kinship ties, which was why they had such a statement. Several villagers who were co-guarantors with the three individuals were dissatisfied, stepping forward to plead their case. Li Jing, we didn't know anything about this matter. You can't punish us all. We are honest and law-abiding people who haven't done anything wrong. We can't be punished because of this beast. That's right, we're innocent. Li Jing, these three evildoers deserve to be killed. But we are all law-abiding, we've never even hurt an ant. We're unjustly accused, Li Jing. Sun Liqing, with his hands behind his back, swept his gaze over the crowd, saying coldly, whether you're wrongly accused or not has nothing to do with me, Sun Ziyue. Daqian country has its laws. 10 households are responsible by imperial decree. If you don't agree, go to the county government to ask for justice and see how Mingfu will judge. Which of these villagers would dare to go to the county government? Some had never even left their village in their entire lives. The crowd wailed, knowing they couldn't escape punishment, they were suffocated with anger. Glancing at the three men crouching on the ground, they suddenly burned with rage. Several people rushed forward to kick and curse them, evil demons. Why don't you go die? You troublemaker, should be beheaded right away. Tuda and his wife along with Chen Ergu and his family were already controlled by the local guards. Seeing their sons being beaten, they couldn't help but struggle and cry out. Stop beating, please don't beat him anymore, he's still a child. He's already so badly hurt, don't hit him anymore. Chen Ergu's wife saw her son being kicked and trampled by the crowd, and she fainted on the spot out of shock. Chen 30 did not have any family come to him, not even his wife. His parents were said to have died long ago, and after his elder brothers had casually gotten him a wife, they split up and lived separately, cutting off most interactions. Naturally, they didn't want to deal with his affairs. Sun Liqing stomped his foot angrily, saying, stop it. If you kill them, you'll all have to go to prison. Hearing this, the crowd backed off after delivering a final kick each. At this moment, Dr. Li's two grandsons were summoned by the village guards to give medical treatment to the three men lying on the ground. Sun Liqing instructed, first, lock them up in the village hall, I'll interrogate them separately later. The guards in attendance were keeping a watchful eye on the three men, ready to haul them away once their injuries were attended to. At this time, Jiang Sanlang was having his wound dressed at Dr. Li's place. He had a wound on the top of his head from where he'd been hit, but it had already stopped bleeding. Dr. Li picked up a pair of scissors, cut off some hair around Jiang Sanlang's wound, and noticed what seemed like signs of healing. He couldn't help but ask, Sanlang, did you apply any medicine? Otherwise, how could a half-a-finger-long wound heal so quickly? Moreover, there was a trace of transparent medicinal extract on his hair. Clearly, some kind of medicine had been applied and had dried up. Jiang Sanlang cast his eyes downwards, pondered a moment and said, I didn't use any medicine. He knew his daughter must have applied something on his wound, but he couldn't say it. Dr. Li didn't press further. He cleansed the wound again with medicinal liquid, sprinkled some medicinal powder on it, and bandaged it up. Sanlang, it seems like you are hurt pretty badly. Is your head feeling dizzy? Jiang Sanlang blinked. I was drowsy at first, but I'm not dizzy now. That's good. Dr. Li said, I'll prescribe you some medicine. You should take it for a few days and rest for a while. Dr. Li took his brush to write the prescription. If you still feel unwell, come back immediately. Don't be negligent about a head injury. After writing the prescription, he personally prepared the medicine, let his daughter-in-law brew a packet of it in the back hall, and served it to Jiang Sanlang. As Jiang Sanlang's case was still pending, he had to stay in town and wait for a summons from the Li Jing. Yingbao had been quiet in her father's arms all the time. The image of those men raising their sticks kept flashing through her mind, and she was still terrified. Daddy, it's my fault, I shouldn't have brought you into town. Otherwise her father wouldn't have been hurt. It's not your fault, Bauer, it's those bad people who wanted to do bad things. Whether we came or not, we couldn't have avoided it. Jiang Sanlang comforted her. The deer from his home had always been coveted by others, so he did not let his daughter bring the deer with her to town with her elder nephew. He didn't expect those three men to be so cruel, attacking in broad daylight, trying to kill him and his daughter. Sanlang, I've had someone prepare a room for you, you should go and rest there. Seeing that the father and daughter had been sitting idle for a while, Dr. Li said, I don't know when it will be over at the Li Jing side. If it's too late, you'll sleep here and go home tomorrow. Jiang Sanlang, Okay, thank you, old Uncle Li, for your kindness. Dr. Li waved his hand. It's just a small effort. You've lost a lot of blood, you should go lie down for a while. All right, in Dongchen village. Chen Yin rushed his donkey cart directly to the Jiang family, telling them that Jiang Sanlang had encountered robbers on the road and was currently being treated at Dr. Li's place. Jiang Lu's wife was nearly scared into fainting, and hurriedly had eldest and second son go to town to check on him. As soon as Jiang Dalong and Jiang Erlang heard, they did not hesitate to borrow Chen Yin's donkey cart and rush to town. When Chen Yang heard that her husband had had an accident, her legs went weak and she wanted to accompany them, crying. Jiang Da's daughter-in-law persuaded, "You can't help by going now. It's better to stay at home and wait." "Don't worry," Chen Yin said that Sanlang and Ingbao are fine, nothing serious happened, and the bad guys have already been sent to the country hall, just waiting to be interrogated. Chen Yang wiped her tears and reluctantly nodded her head. By the time Jiang Dalong and Jiang Erlang arrived in town in their donkey cart, it was already dusk. They arrived at Dr. Li's house and found their younger brother, who was currently unconscious. "Sanlang, what happened to your head?" Seeing that his brother's head was bandaged up like a zongzi dumpling, Jiang Dalong couldn't help but ask worriedly. Jiang Sanlang was already awake. Seeing his elder brothers arrive, he slowly sat up, touched the bandage on his head, and said, "I got hit on the head and got a cut, but I've been treated." "You got a cut? Are you hurt badly?" Jiang Dalong frowned. "I'm fine now," Jiang Sanlang said. "You should lie down." Jiang Erlang quickly reached out to help his younger brother lie back down. Jiang Sanlang shook his head and was about to get out of bed. "I need to go check on things at the village hall, I can't lie here." He didn't know how long he had slept, but he imagined that the Lixing's interrogation must have finished, and it was time for them to question him. "What exactly happened?" Jiang Dalong asked. Jiang Sanlang then explained the situation from beginning to end. He turned to look at his sleeping daughter and sighed, "If it weren't for Baoer's quick thinking to attack them with a scythe, I might have been killed right there." Jiang Dalong was furious. This Chen Lu. Since childhood, he has been spoiled by his parents and has been getting away with robbing and stealing everywhere. "I didn't expect him to dare to hurt you, Sanlang, we can't let this matter slide." "I know." Jiang Sanlang sneered, "He deliberately plotted to kill my daughter and me. How could I possibly let him go? If this time Lixing's son Liqing still wants to downplay the matter, then he would think of a way to finish those three men himself. After all, nothing is more important than their lives. They dared target his daughter, even if they die 100 times, it would not be enough." Chapter 45, Chapter 45, Chapter 45, Compensation. Chapter 45, Chapter 45, Compensation. Before long, Lixing indeed sent someone to summon Jiang Sanlang to the village hall for questioning. Jiang Dalong went with his third younger brother, leaving his second brother behind to look after Ingbao and Dalu. The village hall was where Lixing and the Xiangji worked, and today it would serve as the place where the culprits would be interrogated. Lixing was in charge of the process. It was already evening, and lanterns were hung high in the courtyard of the village hall. Several torches were also set up around, illuminating the entire courtyard. Quite a few people crouched against the courtyard wall. They were the guarantors of the three culprits, amounting to 20 or 30 in total. For several guarantors who were too old, their sons took their places to receive the punishment, each being beaten with 20 planks. As the village men were limited in number, they had to take turns administering the punishment. For a time, the courtyard was filled with the sound of the wooden plank striking flesh, accompanied by cries of pain. With the help of his older brother, Jiang Sanlang walked into the main hall and bowed to Lixing. Lixing asked him to explain the entire incident, and had a clerk record the details on the spot, before cross-checking Jiang's account with the testimonies of the three robbers. After verifying the accuracy of the records, Sun Liqing ordered the families of the three offenders to compensate Jiang Sanlang with 15 taels of silver for his medical expenses. The 15 taels had to be delivered within a specified period, otherwise, severe punishment would ensue. Tuda was straightforward, immediately instructing his family to bring 5 taels of silver, and personally handing it to Jiang Sanlang, saying, "It's all because I failed to discipline my child. Please, Jiang, Mr. Jiang, forgive us." Jiang Sanlang accepted the silver without a trace of emotion, saying calmly, "Whether or not I forgive you is not important. The law will make its judgment." After all, he would never forgive these people. Those who dared to harm him and his daughter would have to pay the price. The remaining 10 taels were to be paid by the families of Qin Sanshi and Qin Dongqi. However, Qin Sanshi's family had nothing, his wife was heavily pregnant, and they couldn't even afford a copper coin. Sun Liqing then ordered the 10 households that had guaranteed Qin Sanshi's family to collectively pay the sum. Anyone who dared to exceed the deadline would be beaten until the debt was cleared. Seeing such a situation, Chen Ergu, who was squatting at the door, came up with a wicked idea. He also claimed that his family had no money, not even a single coin. Sun Liqing laughed coldly, slammed his hand on the table, and said, "Very well, let the 10 families that guaranteed for you collectively pay the money." Upon hearing this, the 10 families simply hated Chen Ergu, grinding their teeth in secret and vowing to never let his family off in the future. Among these 10 families was the father of Qin Chongping, Old Chen. Old Chen, who was already 50, was more humiliation than pain for having been stripped and beaten 20 times in public. To add insult to injury, he had to come up with 500 coins, which made him feel like vomiting blood from anger. But there was no choice. So he let his younger son go home to get the money and handed it over to Sun Liqing. After being beaten and fined, Sun Liqing justifiably let him go. Old Chen was then carried home by his younger son Qin Chongai. All along the way, he criticized Sun Liqing and the village chief for their lack of decency and Chen Ergu for his ungratefulness. Indeed, people of the same family are expected to have the same standards. Look at what Chen Ergu has become. Ever since he was a child, he was ever thieving. Now, he has even turned into a robber, and it's all because of the splendid example set by his father. Turns out, this Chen Ergu was somewhat related to Old Chen, and who would have thought him to be so shameless, demanding his own family to pay for his fine. We must have committed some terrible sin in our past life to have become guarantors with his family. Chongai, tomorrow you go to your cousin's house and ask him to change our guarantor. Old Chen grumbled angrily. Qin Chongai retorted impatiently, "Dad, if you want to change, just go ahead. Now, who would dare to get involved with Chen Ergu's family? I think, let Uncle hurry and drive his family out of the village." True enough, trouble lasts for 1,000 years. Chen Ergu's father is a habitual thief. Despite his age, he even went to steal a chicken from a neighbor's pot during the New Year and was caught red-handed. Alas, they were unfortunately the guarantors of such a family. Upon returning home, Old Chen lay down on the kong, while Chen's wife applied medicine to his wounds. Why would Qin Dongqi be so thoughtless to mix with that street thug Qin Sanshi? Now, it's good, isn't it? Chen Ergu had a son when he least expected it, and before he could leave an heir, the boy is going to be sentenced. While Chen's wife grumbled, she didn't forget to complain, "Your cousin is really something too, how could he let you be beaten like this? You won't be able to get off the kong for a few days." Chen Lashuan's cousin was Qin Chongsheng, the head of Shichen village, and also the one who had pushed them out as guarantors. For this, Chen Lashuan was very aggrieved. Not even showing a little bit of decency, causing him to lose money and face, what kind of relative was this? Humph. When it was his turn to be the village head, he would certainly make him taste the bitterness of inhumanity. At the guard hour, Jiang Sanlang returned home with his sleeping daughter in his arms. Chun Yang hurriedly stepped forward to take over her daughter and placed her on the kong. "How are you? Is the injury serious?" Chun Yang touched her husband's head. "I'm fine, it doesn't matter anymore." Jiang Sanlang took out a bag of silver coins from his bosom and handed it to his wife. "This is the compensation silver given by Li Jing to me and Bao Bao. It's 15 taels in total." Chun Yang took it, set it aside, and asked, "How were the ones who hurt you dealt with? They surely weren't just fined and then let go, right?" "They were not let go. Li Jing said they will be sent to the county government office for punishment early tomorrow morning." After all, Li Jing was not an official of the government, he had no power to sentence criminals, but he could fine some silver or beat a person a few times. Chun Yang was relieved, she put away the money and asked, "Have you eaten?" "I have dinner warming in the pot, would you like some?" "I've eaten. I had chicken porridge at my elder brother's house." Jiang Sanlang then spoke to his wife, "Bao Bao was not well today. Dr. Li said she might have been frightened, so he prescribed her a calming medicine which I've fed her. Let Bao Bao sleep with you tonight, you look after her a bit, I'll go to the west room. All right. Chun Yang took the oil lamp and led her husband to the west room. You sit down first, I'll go get you some hot water. Jiang Sanlang nodded, took off his shoes and sat on the kong, feeling very heavy and sleepy. Soon, Chun Yang brought hot water for him to wash his face, and then brought a basin of foot-washing water for him. After Jiang Sanlang washed up, he laid down and fell asleep. He had lost a lot of blood today, and he felt cold all over, his eyelids trembling. If he didn't lie down and sleep, he might faint. At that moment, Chun Yang brought a bowl of golden ear porridge, insisting that he finish it before he slept. Chun Yang covered her husband with a quilt, then returned to the east room with another basin of water to wash her daughter's face and hands, and then fetched more water to wash her feet. Ing Bao's eyelids twitched as she became immersed in a memory from her past life. In the coldest winter month, when she came back from washing clothes by the river, her birth mother of the Han family, who had always been unfriendly to her, unexpectedly called her into the house, produced a set of brightly colored skirts, and even a pair of anklets for her to put on. Ing Bao took the skirt and shook it out for a look, her face sinking slightly. The fabric was thin, the hem only reached her calves, and the waist dangled with long tassels. It was the kind of dancing skirt worn by Huxian dancers. Inger, we have a distinguished guest at home today. Since you have learned Huxian dance at Wuchuan Yard, why don't you perform it for the guest? The Han family's sweet cries of Inger likely sounded odd even to herself, and the fake motherly smile she put on was particularly phony. Your father's chance to be an official relies on this special guest, so you must behave well and never offend the guest. Ing Bao dropped the skirt in her hands on the table and sneered, why don't you let your second daughter do it? I'm young and ugly, I'm afraid I'll spoil the guest's eyes. Her hands, feet, and face were all covered with frostbite. To ask her to wear such a thin dress in this cold weather, let alone dancing for a man's viewing, even just walking on the street, she would be scolded by people. Performing? She simply wanted to sell her off again. Over the years in the Wuchuan Yard, what kind of people hadn't she seen? Fortunately, she had good relations with Sister Wen and was still young, which was the reason why she hadn't been pushed out by the yard's class leader. She didn't expect that her birth mother who redeemed her was actually intending to use her to please the rich. Chapter 46, Chapter 46, Chapter 46, Dreamscape. Chapter 46, Chapter 46, Dreamscape. Upon seeing her third daughter throw her dress and utter such words, the Han family matriarch was livid. She raised her hand to slap Ing Bao, but the girl deftly dodged her. You little bitch. Have the gall to talk to your mother like this. The matriarch grabbed a washing stick to hit her, while cursing, all you have to do is dance, not cater to guests. Stop acting so virtuous. Ignoring her, Ing Bao turned and bolted. She was not foolish enough to wait around for the matriarch to pummel her. Running towards the courtyard entrance, she suddenly bumped into her biological father Chen Chongping. Chen Chongping, dressed in a green robe, looked at her coldly. Despite the fact that he had never hit her, Ing Bao was understandably intimidated by her father who never treated her as his own. Neither had he protested when her mother beat her or when her siblings, Chen Zhao and Chen Su, bullied her. His silent disregard and contempt instilled an innate fear in Ing Bao. Chen Ing, follow me, Chen Chongping commanded sternly, gesturing to his wife to leave. The matriarch discarded the washing stick and stormed off, fuming. After a moment of hesitation, Ing Bao complied with her biological father and followed him into his study. Seating himself behind the desk, Chen Chongping began, Chen Ing, your mother has always been rather hot-tempered and her treatment of you has been a bit rough. Don't hold it against her. In disbelief, Ing Bao listened as her father criticized her mother for the first time. Chen Chongping coughed then added, over the years, you have suffered a lot while living outside. For that, I don't blame you for your resentment towards your mother. Ing Bao almost laughed at this, half listening as she prepared herself for his next words. Her strictness stems from her concern for you. You've always been a rebellious child, always crossing your mother, involved in all kinds of troubles and wrongdoings. How could you expect her not to get angry with you? Several years ago, when we sent you off, it was because you were too disobedient and rebellious. Feeling helpless, your mother made the decision. Cocking her head to one side, Ing Bao asked, so when she bought me back, does it mean she thought I had been taught well? The vein on Chen Chomping's forehead throbbed as he fought the impulse to slam the desk, slowly saying, "Chen Ing, it was my negligence that I didn't get you back sooner. Now that you're back, it's time you changed your temper and get along well with your mother." Ing Bao remained silent. It wasn't that she didn't want to get along with her birth mother, but her mother abhorred her and never considered her as a daughter. Not knowing any better, she had previously thought that they disliked her because she had done something wrong. Now, at 14, and after spending 5 years in the chaotic environment of Wuchuan Yard, she had gained some understanding of the world. For example, the way her parents treated her and her younger sister and her brother were different. Let's not talk about the only son Chen Su of the family. Even Chen Zhao, although a daughter, was raised by their side. With her sweet talk, cleverness, and ability to adapt, she was much favored by her father. Although the matriarch had a preference for Chen Su, she didn't habitually scold or beat Chen Zhao, even when Zhao occasionally talked back. So, Ing Bao thought, it wasn't that she was beaten for doing something wrong, whatever she did was wrong. Given that, why should she try to curry their favor? Seeing his daughter's stubborn look and the fact that she remained unaffected by his words, Chen Chomping was infuriated. Suppressing his frustration, he spoke in a softer tone, "Chen Ing, you are growing up. You will have to get married someday. Your mother wants to find you a wealthy husband. That's why she is teaching you so strictly. You don't have to hold grudges against her. Which parent doesn't want their child to succeed and live a life of luxury? Alas, all parents in the world are the same. You need to understand what it means to respect elders and to be filial. Accepting things as they come is your duty as a child." Ing Bao fell silent. She had never hoped for her biological parents to give her a life of luxury, nor would she endure without complaint. But she had always harbored an aspiration. She wanted to get a household registration pass, to escape from this family as soon as possible, and live off her own earnings in the future. Alternatively, like her eldest sister Chen Wan, she could get married and leave the Chen household for good. Living in poverty with a farmer is preferable to getting hit and scolded every single day. Frankly, she preferred her days at Wuchuan Yard. Over there, she at least had Sister Wen as a companion. If they weren't dancing, they might occasionally go out to the market to buy snacks and scripts to read. "Chen Ing, we will be welcoming a distinguished guest in our home this afternoon." Chen Chomping, believing that he had adequately set the stage, voiced his thoughts, "The prosperity and status of this family, whether you and your second sister can find good families to marry into, all these depend on this person. As such, your duty is to treat the guest well. Please do not embarrass me." After a short pause, Chen Chomping added, "As long as you behave and stop being obstinate this time, whatever you ask for in the future, I will grant it." Ing Bao's features subtly altered as she asked, "What if I want 50 taels of silver and a household registration to move away?" She yearned to find Sister Wen. Because Sister Wen had promised her that she would form an opera troupe in the future, and let her be the lead. Chen Chomping lowered his eyes, agreed. "Really?" Ing Bao was a little excited. "Then you must swear you'll give me the 50 taels of silver and the document allowing me to leave." Chen Chomping massaged his temples and said, "I swear." "Great," Ing Bao started to feel joyous, "but I can only dance the Huxian dance, I know nothing else." She was best at the Huxian dance, and considering her petite, exquisite figure, when she moved in sync with the drum beats, she danced as if she embodied a nimble, flying bird. "Then you will dance the Huxian dance," sighed Chen Chomping in relief. His brother-in-law, Chen Guanglu, had informed him that the distinguished guest was particularly fond of the Huxian dance, especially when performed by a cunning little woman. If this guest took a liking to her, the official position of county chief might just be within reach. Previously, Chen Chomping had considered purchasing a practicing courtesan who was capable of performing the Huxian dance, but his brother-in-law had mentioned that due to his high status, a purchased courtesan, after all, was merely a lowly servant, and would not catch his eye. Chen Ing, on the other hand, was his own daughter, moreover a scholar's daughter. Even though she had spent several years in Wuchuan Yard, she was still technically a virgin, probably wouldn't offend the aristocrat. By dusk, several well-dressed guests indeed arrived at their home. The man walking in the middle was a middle-aged scholar wearing a Taoist robe. Chen Chomping led this man to the main seat, then ordered the cook to bring out the wine and dishes. After 3 rounds of drinks, Ing Bao was pushed into the main hall by Mrs. Han. She dressed in a red dance skirt and attached anklets to her bare feet, dancing the Huxian dance on the round stage. Her dance was graceful, and her pace was quick in tune with the drum beats, capturing everyone's undivided attention. The middle-aged scholar was evidently pleased. He promptly rewarded her with a jade wall and asked her if she was willing to accompany him to Prefecture City. Ing Bao decidedly declined. The scholar laughed heartily, showing no signs of anger. Chen Chongping, on the other hand, didn't mask his displeasure, continuously glaring at her as if he was going to devour her. Ignoring the glances, Ing Bao cheerfully returned to her own room, holding the jade wall, after changing from her dance dress into her cotton clothes. At that moment, her second sister, Chen Zhao, and her younger brother, Chen Su, who was almost 9, came in. Upon seeing Ing Bao's jade wall, Chen Su immediately grabbed it. "Give it back." Ing Bao was not accustomed to tolerating him and immediately tried to snatch it back. Chen Zhao purposely blocked Ing Bao, allowing Chen Su to run out of the door. "Scoundrel!" Enraged, Ing Bao forcefully pushed Chen Zhao to the floor. As a mixture of old resentments and new grievances rushed into her mind, she mounted her sister and started hitting her relentlessly. "Bao Bao, wake up." Ing Bao was jolted awake, looking around in confusion as she opened her eyes. Chunan held her little girl and soothed her. Did Bao Bao have a nightmare? Just a moment ago, the little girl had been cursing and flailing about in her sleep. It had scared her to death. Chapter 47, Chapter 47, Chapter 47, Borrowing Money. Chapter 47, Chapter 47, Borrowing Money. Ing Bao held her mother tightly, nuzzling her head against her chest. Thankfully, it was just a dream. Thankfully, she came back. Chun Yang patted her daughter's back, softly saying, "Bao Bao, are you hungry? It's already noon, you were sleeping so soundly, your mom couldn't wake you." Ing Bao nodded, "I'm hungry." "Then I'll go bring the lunch, and you hurry up and wash your face," Chun Yang said. Ing Bao turned her head to see her two little brothers. They sat beside her, sucking on their fingers while squinting and laughing at her. She let go of her mom and rushed over to her little brothers, touching their chubby heads while laughing and saying, "Xiaojie, Dao, would you like it if your sister taught you to read later?" Xiaojie took his finger out of his mouth, and slobbered on his sister's face when she came over, making a sound as if he agreed. Xiaowu suddenly turned his head and slapped his big brother's forehead, then started to bite his fat little hand. "Oh my, Xiaowu, why are you biting your big brother?" Ing Bao quickly pulled Xiaowu away. Xiaojie began to wail, holding up his bitten hand to complain to his mother. Chunyang, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, touched Xiaojie's little hand and even blew on it. Okay, Xiaojie, it doesn't hurt." Xiaowu was just joking with his big brother. Xiaojie rubbed his eyes, truly stopped crying, and went back to sit with his sister and little brother. Ing Bao gently tapped Xiaowu's forehead, whispering, "You can't bite your brother in the future, okay?" Xiaowu blinked, burrowed into his sister's arms, turned his head and glared at Xiaojie, sneakily sticking out his tiny foot to kick him, hoping to push him further away from his sister. Jiang Sanlang had been lying on the Kong bed for 2 days. He drank medicine on time every day, ate the steamed egg made by his little daughter, and was lively, even taking off the bandage wrapped around his head. Now it was the busiest time of farming season. The wheat in the dry fields was to be harvested, the rice seedlings in the water fields were to be transplanted, and millet was to be planted in the fields near South Mountain. At this time of year, even the donkey belonging to the village head would be exhausted. Ing Bao was also busy looking after her little brothers, allowing her parents to tend to the fields without worries. Apart from looking after her brothers, she also had to find time to cook for her parents and to make a bowl of steamed egg for her brothers to supplement their nutrition. As for the things in the cave, they would have to wait until nighttime. The seed she bought from the salesman had been completely planted in the cave, just waiting to sprout. The exotic seeds received her special care, being planted in the dark soil next to the water pool. And those 30 golden ears seemed to have truly mutated. Not only did they not collapse, but they grew bigger, shiny, and translucent, golden in color, very beautiful. As for the 3 piles of grain harvested earlier, they had not yet been completely threshed. Ing Bao decided to secretly take the wheat from the cave to the threshing site when her family's wheat was taken there, and pile it with their wheat to be threshed together. Yuan Bao's school was on holiday for the farming season. He and Huzi often came over to play with his little cousins. Occasionally, with the approval of his little lady cousin, they could ride Yu Yu around the village, drawing many envious and jealous eyes. Xiaojie and Xiaowu were also very excited to see Yu Yu, always crawling in her direction. So, Yingbao found 2 small carriers and tightened them with ropes. She then hung them on both sides of Yu Yu's back and fixed them with the saddle so they wouldn't move to one side. Then she put each of her brothers in a carrier and led them here and there. Xiaojie and Xiaowu were thrilled, clinging to the edge of the carriage and looking out, laughing non-stop. Huzi watched them enviously, persistently pulling Yingbao's sleeve, wanting to be in the carriage as well. Without any other choice, Yingbao had to place her 2 brothers in one carrier and let Huzi wait in the other one. Therefore, the village saw an unusual sight. A 2-year-old girl leading a big deer with 2 carriers hanging on each side. In those carriers sat 3 boys, one of whom was noticeably larger than the girl. Dalu was surrounded by several children who were enviously staring at Huzi, Xiaojie, and Xiaowu. The master sighed and shook his head upon seeing this. The world has gone downhill, and the weak are being overpowered by the strong. What's wrong with these children in the village? Why are they always circled around a tiny little girl? Several days passed. The wheat in the village had been mostly harvested. Some had already been threshed, with only the drying to be completed. In those few days, Li Jing had already come to inspect once, announcing that this year's taxes would be increased by 10%. The villagers grumbled, but they were powerless. So, many villagers rushed to dry their wheat, hoping to sell their crops early to make more silver coin. This was because the imperial court now implemented a tax law based on the amount of land one owned, and taxes were calculated into silver coin. So, the people had to sell their grain first to get the money to pay their taxes. This resulted in the rapid oversaturation of the grain market after the summer harvest, with prices heavily suppressed by wealthy merchants. Therefore, people had to sell their grain before the price dropped in order to reduce their losses. Jiang Sanlang's wheat had also been gathered and laid out to dry in the threshing ground, ready to thresh in a few days. But he was not in a rush, for he had enough silver coin to pay his taxes, and he didn't plan to sell his grain at this time. Uncle Chen had said that the price of grain would definitely rise this winter, so he not only refused to sell his grain, but also planned to buy some from other families to store. He wouldn't purchase a great deal, just enough for his family to live a comfortable year. While he was flipping his wheat over to dry, Chen Ergu from Shichen village suddenly ran over with his wife, knelt before Jiang Sanlang, and began to sob and beg. "Sanlang, I beg you to go to the county town and speak up for my son Lulu, sniff sniff." Jiang Sanlang jumped, quickly retreated and said coldly, "I wonder if you're appealing to the wrong person." Chen Ergu crawled forward on his knees, tears and snot running down his face. "Sanlang, it's all my son Lulu's fault for listening to that damn Chen 30's incitement, but you didn't suffer any harm. Can you please go to the county elder and ask him to let my son go, sniff sniff. I beg you." Jiang Sanlang was rendered speechless and barked, "Are you suggesting I suffered no harm?" He lowered his head, pointing at a large bald scar on his scalp. "Are you blind? Who do you think caused this to happen?" Chun Yang also angrily said, "My husband was nearly killed by your son Chen Lulu, and you dare to say nothing happened?" Chen Ergu blinked his small eyes, thinking to himself, "You seem to be very alive and kicking now." He sniffed, sobbing, "Then, can you lend me some money, so I can redeem my son?" Even though his son had committed a crime, he was still under 18 years old. The county elder said that as long as their family could come up with 50 taels of silver, they could redeem their son and bring him home. If they couldn't produce the ransom, Chen Lulu would have to remain in the county jail indefinitely. But where could he get 50 taels of silver? He couldn't even scrape together 100 coin from his home. He had tried to borrow from the entire village over the past few days, but no one was willing to lend him any money. Many people locked their doors and closed their windows as soon as they saw him coming. Even after he called and pleaded, they didn't respond a word. It was old Qin Xuan who told him that Jiang Sanlang from East Village had completely recovered and was bouncing around lively, far from looking like someone who had been severely injured. Moreover, on that day, Jiang Sanlang received 15 taels of compensation, 15 taels. All built from the blood and sweat of the people of West Village. Old Qin Xuan also suggested to him that Jiang Sanlang's home was supposedly growing gold. Even a small escape of savings would be enough for 50 taels. He suggested Chen Ergu visit Jiang and cry and ask for help, as old Jiang was known for caring about his reputation and may very well provide support. Jiang Sanlang was nearly laughing with rage. How dare you have the nerve to come here to borrow money from me? Who gave you such audacity? Chapter 48, Chapter 48, Chapter 48, Busy Farming. Chapter 48, Chapter 48, Busy Farming. Chen Ergu spoke with certainty. I borrow money, but I always pay it back. Sanlang, saving a life is better than creating 7 statues, so could you just do me a favor? When my donkey comes home, he can consider you his godfather, he'll work for you for life. Jiang Sanlang and Chun Yang turned green with indignation and furiously yelled, "Get lost." They picked up a wooden spade to hit him. Scared, Chen Ergu and his wife crawled up and ran far away, still not stopping their gabbles. Could I borrow your deer? When my donkey comes back, I'll go hunting in the mountains to repay you with another deer, no, 3 in return. Jiang Sanlang became so furious that he lifted the wooden shovel and chased after them. Scared, Chen Ergu and his wife broke into a run and disappeared in a cloud of dust. Upon hearing this, the villagers in the threshing ground couldn't help but scoff, really shameless. No wonder Chen Lulu dares to block the road and rob. With such parents, it's no surprise he turned out this way. The more Jiang Sanlang thought about it, the stranger Chen Ergu's behavior seemed. No, I have to go see the clan leader of the Chen family and have him solve this. After all, Chen Ergu is from the Chen family clan, and only the clan leader could control him. Chun Yang nodded. You go. I'm worried Chen Ergu might make more trouble. Yes. Jiang Sanlang threw the spade he was holding and headed towards the clan leader's house. The midsummer sun was as hot as a small stove. Ing Bao took Yu for a walk out. Seeing Xiaowu and Xiaojia's heads sweating under the bright sunlight, she quickly returned home. She helped her 2 younger brothers off the carrying basket and asked Yu and Bao to get Huzi as well. She spread 2 mats on the ground in the main room, and the 4 boys sat down to play with the Kongming lock and Tangram puzzles. Little Ing Bao then went into the kitchen to cook. She couldn't stir-fry, but she could wash rice and cook it, along with boiling some water chestnuts on the side. With no one around, Ing Bao simply got a basket of water chestnuts, washed them thoroughly, and started boiling them. Her family's stove had 2 pots, perfect for cooking both rice and water chestnuts. Before long, the rice was cooked and the water chestnuts boiled. She took out the water chestnuts and poured the water into a clay jar, stirred in some brown sugar, and set it aside to cool for Yu and Bao and Huzi to drink later. She then picked some green vegetables, washed them and set them aside for her mother to cook. In early spring, one of their hens had hatched a brood of 20 chicks, which were now big enough to find their own food. Ing Bao threw them the plucked vegetable leaves to peck at. Fluffy chicks circled around Ing Bao's feet, clucking incessantly. It wasn't until evening that Jiang Sanlang and Chun Yang came home. Seeing that their daughter had cooked the rice and prepared the vegetables, Chun Yang touched her little girl's head, praising, "Bao Bao, you're so capable." Ing Bao gave a small smile. I also boiled some chestnuts. Yu and Bao and Huzi took some home, and we still have a little left. Mother, you taste. Chun Yang was surprised. Did you go chestnut picking again? Ing Bao nodded. Did you take your brothers with you? Chun Yang asked. It seemed she had seen her daughter leading the deer around earlier. No, I went by myself, Ing Bao replied straightforwardly, not blushing. Chun Yang took her at her word, adding, Bao Bao, in the future, when you go out to play, it's better to go with your siblings. The previous incident was still unresolved, so she didn't dare let her daughter out of their sight by herself. Okay, mother, don't worry. From now on, I will stay with Sister Danny and the others, Ing Bao obediently nodded. Once Chun Yang had finished cooking the vegetables, the family sat down to eat. Xiaojia and Xiaowu, smelling the delicious food, quickly crawled over and started clamoring for attention from their parents and sister. Chun Yang fed them steamed egg with a spoon and asked her husband. Sanlang, what did the clan leader of Chen family from West Village say? Jiang Sanlang wolfed down his rice, saying, Chen Ergu said it was Chen Lao's one who stirred things up, and the clan leader of Chen family gave him a scolding. I guess this matter will just end as it is. However, the Chen family's clan leader assured me that Chen Ergu won't bother us again. That's good news. Chun Yang was somewhat relieved. After finishing his meal, Jiang Sanlang cleaned up the dishes and started washing them while Chunyang boiled water for the children to bath and change clothes. Ever since the two little monkeys learned to crawl, they've been scampering all over the place, making themselves as dirty as mud monkeys, their shorts and shirts looking as if they had been dug out of mud. After changing their clothes, Chunyang patted her son's bottom. "If you continue to crawl all over the place, I'll punish you." Xiaojie giggled while Xiaowu crinkled his nose and turned around, looking for his sister for comfort. At this moment, Yingbao was lying on a table in the west room, first copying from a calligraphy model, then transcribing the 1,000-character classic. Her handwriting was already quite impressive, though it lacked a bit of flair. It was pretty and neat. The summer harvest ended. Li Jin came with the local constables to collect taxes, and Jiang Sanlang was the first to pay his taxes, also paying for his two older brothers. Once they sold their golden ears, his brothers would naturally pay him back. In the meantime, the Jiang family bought several hundred jin of wheat from other villagers, to be stored as food. After the wheat harvest comes plowing, rice planting, and soybean planting. All these chores would keep them busy for a month. And just at this time, the golden ears also ripened and needed to be harvested and dried urgently. Jiang Sanlang was in a bit of a predicament, not knowing which to do first. "Father, I can harvest the golden ears. Let me take care of this." Yingbao volunteered to help. "There are only 300 golden ears in our family. I can finish picking them in 2 days. The sun is now strong, so it'll save us the trouble of drying. Then I'll leave it to Bao Bao." Jiang Sanlang gladly agreed. So Yingbao started to busily work, while her two younger brothers were well behaved, not causing any trouble. As long as they could see their sister, they could sit quietly on the mat and play with tangram puzzles for 2 hours. The golden ears were dried under the hot sun for 5 days until completely dry, with none of them getting moldy or rotting. Just in time, Jiang Sanlang and his wife had also finished plowing the dry land and planting rice seedlings. Taking a day off, the 3 Jiang brothers took the dried golden ears to the county town and sold them all. This time, Jiang Sanlang sold 11 jin of golden ears and got 33 taels of silver. Jiang Dalong's 100 golden ears also dried up to 3 jins, which were sold for 9 taels of silver. Jiang Erlang made the same amount, earning 9 taels. Even old man Jiang made 1 coin and 8. The family happily returned from the county town, bringing back loads of cloth and daily necessities. Now, the entire village knew that the Jiang family made a lot of money from selling golden ears. The first to inquire was the Wang's second sister-in-law. Her house was not far from Jiang Sanlang's. In the recent days, she saw the Jiang family spreading out the yellow mushrooms to dry. Although curious, she only took a brief look. Later, the 3 Jiang brothers took loads of yellow mushrooms to the county town and brought back lots of cloth and goods. Even a fool could guess they made a lot of money. "Chunyang, how did your family grow those yellow mushrooms? Could you spare some seeds for us?" Wang's second sister-in-law smiled broadly as she questioned Chunyang. Chunyang chuckled, "Sure, but our seeds are very expensive, costing 10 coins per plant." "What? 10 coins per plant? You might as well rob." Wang's second sister-in-law turned around and left, her face darkening. Chunyang ignored her. Selling them at 10 coins a plant would be a loss. Why not grow it for themselves? Sigh, if not for the limited space in the bamboo shed, Sanlang would like to plant 400 or 500 plants at a time. Chapter 49, Chapter 49, Chapter 49, Surname 1. Chapter 49, Chapter 49, Surname 1. After the summer harvest, the villagers were busy selling grain. Both carrying loads and pushing carts, they filled the entire street of the town. A black canopy carriage came down the official road, followed by 2 sword-carrying attendants riding fine horses. Such fine-looking horses were rarely seen by the villagers, so they couldn't help but stop and watch. The carriage headed straight for Rongji Pharmacy. The carriage stopped in front of Rongji Pharmacy, the attendants got off their horses, and an elderly man with white hair was helped out of the carriage. Then, a young man about 17 or 18 got out of the car. Senior, you actually came yourself." Dr. Li hurriedly ran out from the shop, almost tripping midway. Seeing the visitors, his hands trembled with excitement. The old man laughed and greeted him, "Dr. Li, I trust all is well since we last met." With reddened eyes, Dr. Li stepped forward to pay his respects. "I'm honored by your concern, Senior. Please come inside." The old man laughed and agreed, and then introduced the young man next to him. "This is my eldest grandson, Heng Chuan. Heng Chuan, this is my fifth junior, come say hello." Heng Chuan stepped forward and greeted, "Greetings, fifth uncle Senior." Dr. Li quickly greeted him and warmly said, "Very good, you must be tired from the journey. Please come inside and have a seat." The group entered the pharmacy and proceeded to the back room. Dr. Li asked his two grandsons to brew tea while he instructed a servant to arrange for the guests' carriage and attendants to rest in the courtyard. The three of them settled down to chat. "Dr. Li, how is the patient you wrote about in your letter?" the old man asked. "He's doing very well." Dr. Li replied, "I saw him a while ago, he looked rosy and was quite strong." The old man smiled, took a sip from his tea, and asked again, "May I see the patient?" Dr. Li stroked his beard, thought for a moment, and said, "Seeing him is possible, but he lives in a village 5 or 6 miles from here. Suddenly calling on him might raise unnecessary suspicions. Plus, it's the busy farming season." The old man waved his hand, "I'm not calling him here. I want to visit his family personally." "That could work." Dr. Li laughed, "The Jiangs are honest and kind people. If you visit, they will surely welcome you." The old man chuckled and put down his cup. "Dr. Li, may I see your medical case notes?" Of course, of course." Dr. Li got up and went to fetch the case notes. As doctors, they keep detailed records for all challenging and complex cases. The miraculous cure of Jiang Erlang was recorded without missing a single detail. Dr. Li brought out a large book and handed it to Senior Wen Jingyan. "Senior, please take a look." Wen Jingyan took the book and carefully opened it. The book not only recorded Jiang Erlang's pulse readings from a few years ago, but also the state of his pulse during each of his visits last year. It even included his daily diet and his pulse condition after the illness was cured. Wen Jingyan picked up a few strands of hair in the pulse case and asked, "What is this?" Dr. Li pointed to some transparent dried-up medicinal fluid on the hair and said, "His brother was injured in a fight. When he came here, his wound was mostly healed, like he had applied some kind of medication beforehand. But he denied it. He touched his nose in embarrassment. Curious, I took the liberty of keeping this strand of hair." When Jingyan pinched the transparent substance on the hair, held it up to his nose and smelled it, and nodded his head, "It has a slight fragrance, I can't tell what it is." The youth by his side said, "Grandfather, why not dissolve it in water and try it on a small animal?" When Jingyan nodded, "That's a good idea." So, Dr. Li ordered a servant to catch a cat, cut off a bit of its hair, and made a small wound with a knife. Then they soaked the hair in a little bit of cold water, and the dried transparent substance gradually dissolved. When Jingyan personally applied the water-soaked cotton cloth to the cat's wound. Half an incense later, the wound was healed and a scab formed. All three of them were stunned. What kind of medicine is this? Its efficacy is so incredible. When Jingyan had a serious expression on his face and turned to the others, "This is no trivial matter. We must be careful with what we say or it could harm both ourselves and others." Dr. Li and Heng Chuan immediately swore, "We will not breathe a word of this to anyone, otherwise let us be condemned by men and gods alike." When Tingbin nodded and stroked his beard. When family has been practicing medicine for generations. We must set a good example. We cannot do anything that could endanger people's lives. Dr. Li, as half a member of my Wen family, we must keep this between us. Dr. Li rose and bowed, "Rest assured, Senior. No matter what, I will not involve the Zhangs in this." "That's good." When Jingyan sighed, "I came here this time solely to treat the child and for no other reasons. Since it involves the survival of my family, I must be very careful. Dr. Li, I hope you can understand." "Senior, please don't say that. My life and livelihood were all given to me by my master. We're only asking for a prescription. What's more, we're only asking for the medicine and have no intention of robbing them. As long as we offer a generous reward and promise their family's well-being, I'm sure the Jiangs will be willing." "Well, let's hope so." When Jingyan sighed lightly, "We cannot rush this matter. Let's go have a look first and then make a plan. The family has been keeping it a secret all this time and it seems they don't want others to know." If we rush to ask for the medicine, it will certainly make them resistant. We must proceed with caution. All right, I'll take Senior to Chen village tomorrow, Dr. Li said. The next day, Ingbao was taking her younger brothers for a stroll, leading a deer. Suddenly, she saw a carriage entering the village and slowly stopping in front of her uncle's house. 3 people got out of the carriage, 2 elderly men and a young man, among whom was Dr. Li. Curious villagers quickly gathered round to watch the spectacle. The 3 men stood at the gate of the yard, and Dr. Li loudly asked, "Is Brother Jiang at home?" When old man Jiang heard the voice, he came out to see it was Dr. Li, and immediately went forward to greet him. "So it's you, Brother Li. What brings you here today?" Dr. Li laughed. "My senior, Wen Jingyan, happened to be passing through this area and was impressed by the beautiful scenery here, so he wanted to come and take a look." "That's wonderful." Old man Jiang laughed and greeted Wen Jingyan. "Mr. Wen, please come in and sit down." Wen Jingyan quickly returned the greeting. "I'm sorry for intruding, Brother Jiang." "Not at all." Old Jiang laughed and ushered the men inside. Wen Hengchuan also came forward to greet. "Junior Wen Hengchuan, nice to meet you, Mr. Jiang." Old man Jiang blinked. It was the first time someone had called him Mr., and he felt immediately dignified. He, this young man is." Wen Jingyan laughed. "He's my eldest grandson, named Hengchuan." "Brother Jiang, just call him Hengchuan." "Ah. Ha ha ha, good, Hengchuan, come in quickly." Old man Jiang led the 3 men into the courtyard. Because it was a bit dark inside, he arranged a few benches under the persimmon tree, brought out a small dining table, and invited the guests to sit down. Lady Jiang hurriedly went to boil tea. As there was no tea in the house and she felt it inappropriate to serve plain boiled water, she brewed a pot of water with fresh bamboo leaves instead. Ingbao also came to see what was going on. Having heard them claim they were of the Wen family, her heart jumped. Was it the same one as from Sister Wen's family? She quickly took her brothers home, then ran back to eavesdrop on their conversation. Chapter 50, Zhong Ling Yu Xiu. Chapter 50, Zhong Ling Yu Xiu. The few of them chatted about family matters for a while, after which Wen Jingyan requested to meet Jiang Erlang. As a doctor himself, he wanted to check Jiang Erlang's pulse. Jiang's old man naturally agreed, immediately getting up and taking the 3 of them to his second son's house. Village children followed them from a distance, chattering all the way, curious about this distinguished guest who was visiting the Jiang family. When they passed by the house of the 3rd son, the old man from Jiang introduced, "This is my 3rd son's house." When Jingyan noticed a large deer in the courtyard, with a saddle on its back, clearly intended as a mount for people. He was astonished and proposed to go in and have a look. Upon entering the house of Jiang's 3rd son, they saw a few sheds set up in the courtyard and a large stove. Under an apple tree, a mat was spread out, and 4 boys were playing with Kongming locks. The old man from Jiang chuckled and said, "The eldest is my 1st son's child, and the 2nd son's. The twins are my 3rd sons." "Oh," when Jingyan laughed, "your Jiang family is indeed prosperous." Not at all," the old man from Jiang stroked his beard, his smile broad. Since there were no adults in the house of the 3rd son, when Jingyan didn't feel it appropriate to linger and went on to the house of Jiang Erlang with the old man from Jiang. At that moment, Jiang Erlang was at home, dividing up some golden mushrooms. Hearing someone's visit, he hurriedly came out from the bamboo shed. "Erlang, this Mr. Wen here wants to check your pulse," announced the old man from Jiang straightforwardly. Jiang Erlang stepped forward to greet them, and after introducing each other further, they all entered the main room. When Jingyan took Jiang Erlang's pulse and found indeed he was very healthy. He stroked his beard, nodded, and smiled, "Congratulations. You are in good health, young man." Jiang Erlang scratched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly. Even he himself had almost forgotten that he had been ill, let alone someone else remembered. After sitting for a while, when Jingyan and the others got up to wander outside, but showed no sign of leaving. The old man from Jiang perceived that he would probably have to serve them dinner. For such a dinner, they would of course need to invite some people to accompany them. Hence, the clan leader Chen Sanyo and the master were once again invited to the Jiang family for a meal. Luckily, the Jiang family was now well off and could afford several tables of food daily. Had it been in the past, having such frequent feasts could have impoverished a family. At the dinner, naturally they talked about the Jiang family growing golden mushrooms. The clan leader and Chinsanyo seemed to want to say something but stopped. Given the distinguished guest present, they didn't go into deep discussion. Afterward, they talked about the local river Chuanha and the forests. When Jingyan laughed and said, "Such a place, with clear mountains and beautiful waters, makes me reluctant to leave." The clan leader laughed and responded, "If the elder doesn't mind, why not stay for a few more days? My house is quite spacious. If the elder doesn't despise it, feel free to rest at my humble abode." Assuming that Mr. Wen, who was passing by, would decline, to his surprise, when Jingyan nodded with a smile, "I'd rather follow your command than refuse. I'll be imposing on you." The clan leader was stunned for a moment, then immediately laughed, "That's great. I'll have someone clean up a few rooms for you when we get back." As such, Mr. Wen and his grandson Wen Hengchuan decided to stay. However, though they were staying in the house of the clan leader, it was not right to eat their food and use their things every day. Wen Hengchuan had the attendant buy grain and dishes and sent them to the clan leader's house. Of course, he also sent quite a bit to the Jiang family. The grandfather and grandson stayed this way, strolling around every day, and often ended up at the Jiang family. They chatted very congenially with the old man from Jiang. In his entire life, the old man from Jiang has never met such a humble nobleman, so naturally, he was willing to chat with him more. When Jingyan, a learned medical practitioner, could roughly know a person's health by just looking at their complexion. However, it seemed that everyone in the Jiang family was robust and ruddy. Compared to the surrounding villagers, the difference was evident. Especially the family of Jiang Sanlang, the women were fair and soft, the 3 children were smart and outstanding, and Jiang Sanlang was even more robust and handsome. If it wasn't for their coarse and plain clothes, Wen Jingyan would think that this was a family of well-bred sons and daughters of some illustrious household. One day, while Wen Jingyan was leisurely walking around the village with his eldest grandson, they accidentally bumped into the little girl from the Jiang family who was riding a deer. "Your name is Bao, isn't it?" Wen Jingyan asked with a smile. Bao nodded, suddenly remembering Sister Wen. She wanted to ask this grandfather Wen if there was a girl named Wen Shu in his family, but she couldn't. Not only could she not ask, she couldn't even mention it. Upon seeing the child's lively eyes and recognizing her as a clever one, Wen Jingyan asked, "I heard from your grandfather that you can already read and write." Bao, learned from brother Yuan Bao. "Then do you want to learn medicine?" Wen Jingyan asked with a beaming smile. Bao's eyes lit up as she quickly nodded, "Yes. Grandfather Wen, are you going to take me as your apprentice?" Wen Jingyan stroked his beard and laughed, "I don't take apprentices anymore. However, we have clan schools at my place, even schools for girls. If you're willing, and your parents agree, I can take you back and enroll you in school." "Where is your home then?" Bao asked. If it were in the county town, she could go, because her father would go to the county town every month or 2 to sell golden ears, so it wouldn't prevent her from seeing her family. "Not in the county town, my family clan is in Yuzhou, which is nearly 1,000 miles away from here." "That's far." Bao quickly shook her head, "No, I'm not going." Are you kidding me? She hadn't even been that far in her previous life. Moreover, she didn't want to separate from her parents and younger brother. When Jingyan stroked his beard, seemingly not regretful, Bao stole glances at the old man with white beard, then looked at the young man beside him. She didn't feel that they had any resemblance with Sister Wen. "Grandfather Wen, do you have a little sister at home who is about 8 or 9 years old?" "A little sister who is about the same age as my sister Danny." When Jingyan laughed, "There are quite a lot." Bao rolled her eyes and asked again, "Then what are their names?" When Jingyan looked at the little girl, not irritated, but instead said seriously, "There are many granddaughters in my family and I can't remember all their names." Bao felt a little disappointed, sighed heavily, and drooped her head. Sister Wen never mentioned the names of her family members, nor what her family's pharmacy was called. But once, she seemed to mention that she had a little brother named Bao Bao, a name similar to hers. But Bao Bao is usually a nickname, only those closest would call that. This old man didn't even know his granddaughter's full name, so it's even less likely he knows his grandson's nickname. Seeing the little girl seemed a bit upset, when Hengchuan, who stood beside them, asked out of curiosity, "Why does Ingbao want to ask for their names?" He had never seen a child ask such a question. Ingbao blinked her eyes and made up a random excuse, "Because I want to play with them. Now, my big sister and second sister are all very busy and have no time to play with me." When Hengchuan held his forehead, "I see that your village also has a school. Since you can already read, why don't you go to school with your little cousin? It has to be better than wandering around alone. Because the schoolmaster does not allow girls into the school," Ingbao said. When Jingyan glanced at his grandson, when Hengchuan suddenly felt like he had just asked a silly question and uncomfortably coughed. Oh, talking to a little kid can inadvertently lower your own intelligence. Although the Great Qian dynasty didn't prohibit girls from going to school, girls' schools only existed in the families of officials or the extremely wealthy. Nothing like that existed in small mountain villages. Not only could girls not go to school, many boys also didn't even have the chance to learn to read. Chapter 51, Chapter 51, Chapter 51, finally left. Chapter 51, Chapter 51, finally left. The village in front of them had about 40 to 50 households, each with at least 1 or 2 children under 10 years old. When Jingyan looked around and a sudden thought sprouted in his mind. Why not start a medical academy here and let the village children learn some medical skills? In this way, he could frequently interact with the Jiang family and it would be convenient for him to act later. These days, no matter how he tried to probe or even directly asked if their family had any ancestral secret medicine, old Mr. Jiang denied it and chuckled, claiming that his ancestors were just farmers. How could they have any secret medicine? He also secretly observed the expressions and mannerisms of the Jiang family. They appeared carefree, as if they had no secrets. If it wasn't for witnessing the medicine on the strand of hair and its magical effect, he would have thought that his junior had misdiagnosed Jiang Erlang's illness. As for Jiang Sanlang, he had been living here for 3 days but had only exchanged a single sentence with him. It was not that Jiang Sanlang ignored people, but the young man was too busy and often disappeared for the entire day. Unable to continue delaying here, when Jingyan felt impatient. Hengchuan, what do you think about setting up a medical academy here? When Jingyan turned to his grandson and asked. When Hengchuan looked doubtful, Grandfather, why start a medical academy here? It's quite far from our place and wouldn't be convenient for us to travel. When Jingyan sighed, I know it's inconvenient, but you're aware of the situation at home too. If something happens to him, our family will definitely be affected. I think we should send 1 or 2 of our children to settle here, let them establish roots here as a backup plan for our family. Things won't always be peaceful in Beijing. When Hengchuan fell silent. His grandfather was right, once that person can't be treated, their family would likely be in trouble. Let's follow grandfather's arrangement. When Hengchuan calmly said, however, setting up an academy here will require careful planning. We not only need someone to settle here, but we also need to establish good relations with the local prominent families. Neither he nor his grandfather would surely teach here, so they could only select 1 or 2 reliable children from their family to come. When Jingyan nodded, since we're setting up an academy, we must discuss the rules with the clan leader of the Chen family as they also have a family academy and ours can't conflict with theirs. Why not start a women's medical academy? Teach the girls here medical skills, perhaps it might help to continue the legacy of women doctors in the one family. Although the Great Qian dynasty was considered liberal, very few women studied medicine. This was because female doctors mostly specialized in treating other women, mainly dealing with gynecological conditions, including pregnancy and childbirth. Women from wealthy families would never study obstetrics because a doctor inevitably has to examine the patient's body, which would be regarded as impure. This would make it difficult for them to get married later on. Those who are willing to learn are mostly women who have had children, but these late-starter doctors would not achieve significant success. When Hengchuan chuckled, indeed, not considering others, Ingbao alone is quite talented. The next day, when Jingyan and his grandson bid their farewell, old Mr. Jiang saw them off to their carriage, waving his hand, sincerely asking them to visit again so he could offer some golden ears for the old brother to taste. At the same time, Jiang Sanlang let out a sigh of relief. Finally, they left. Whenever those two spoke to him, their conversation was never far from the topic of Erlang's recovery. They even inquired about any folk remedies or family secret medicines they might have, which had scared him into avoiding them these past few days. Ah, they've left. Hopefully, they won't return again. Chunyang, I'm planning to build a brick and tile house on South Mountain. While eating, Jiang Sanlang said, these few days, I've ordered bricks and tiles for 3 rooms at the brick kiln. I estimate they should be ready by autumn, so then we can hire people to build our house. Really? Chunyang was very happy. They now have almost 100 taels of silver. Building a 3-room brick and tile house wouldn't take up to 100. In the future, when they earn more money, they can buy some good timber, hire people to make a few sets of furniture, build a large courtyard and some bamboo sheds. My 2 elder brothers are also ready to build with us. The 3 of us brothers will build houses of the same size, as well as courtyards of the same size. Jiang Sanlang said happily, I also bought 10 acres of land from several villagers, and will build the bamboo sheds there. You bought land? Chunyang exclaimed, does that mean our household registration level will be upgraded? If their household registration level increased, the taxes they had to pay would also increase correspondingly. For instance, their current registration is a 4th-class lower household, hence they pay much less in taxes than Chen Tsuanjing's 1st-class upper household. Jiang Sanlang, even without buying land, building a house here would cause our registration level to increase. As soon as we've built our house, Sun Liqing will come over for inspection and registration next year. The imperial court has numerous reasons for levying taxes. They need to keep track of how much livestock the common people have, how many houses, and how many pieces of furniture and farming tools. After compiling this data, they categorize households into 5 classes for taxation purposes. Classes 1 to 3 are upper households and pay 1/10 more in taxes than classes 4 and 5, which are lower households. Therefore, many farmers avoid building houses or walls wherever possible. Instead, they just encircle their houses with bamboo fences. Quite a few wealthy people even bribe officials to be classified as a 4th or 5th class lower household, just to pay less in taxes every year. As a result, common people like Jiang Sanlang bear the brunt of these unfair practices. Chunyang started worrying again. If our level increases and our taxes rise, what if they stop buying golden ears? If they don't buy from us, then we'll sell somewhere else. Jiang Sanlang was not afraid at all. Since growing golden ears doesn't require much capital, as long as we can sell them, we're making a profit. He didn't have any business experience earlier and was always worried and afraid. But now that he has money in hand, he feels much more confident. When he walks outside, he carries himself with pride. Upon careful reflection, Chunyang agreed that her husband makes sense. She finally let go of some of her worries. Make sure to build the courtyard wall higher. South Mountain is secluded after all, it's not very safe. Of course. Jiang Sanlang chuckled, don't worry, even after it is built, we won't move in immediately. We'll wait until next spring and move along with my 2 elder brothers. The sky is filled with the end of summer, the leaves echo with the sound of autumn. In the blink of an eye, autumn arrived. After the autumn harvest and sowing the winter wheat, the 3 Jiang brothers began construction on South Mountain, attracting the help of the entire village. Not for anything else, but because the Jiang family provided a large rice meal at noon, along with a fragrant stewed pork dish. The South Mountain was thriving. Some were building walls, some were chopping and transporting bamboo, some were helping with cooking, some were picking up stones for foundation, while others went further to quarry stone slabs. There was incessant activity. Ingbao and her 2 brothers stayed at home and didn't go to South Mountain, but she heard about the progress of their house building from her mother every day. Because it was 3 brothers building together and on the same line, the scale of the houses seemed particularly grand. A month later, the houses on South Mountain were finally completed. After a few more days, the courtyard walls were also built and the doors and windows installed. They still couldn't move in though, because they had to wait for the dampness in the new house to dissipate fully. At the same time, the last batch of golden ears also matured. Jiang Sanlang and his wife quickly harvested and dried them. With all the work, they entirely forgot about their son's first birthday. Just make a long life noodle bowl, what kind of birthday does the little rascal need to celebrate? Jiang Sanlang didn't think much of it, saying, their father never celebrated his birthday anyway. Chun Yang gave him an annoyed glance, but didn't say anything else. She really made a few bowls of noodles, topped with 2 poached eggs. The whole family had a hearty meal. Chapter 52, Chapter 52, Chapter 52, Big Gourd. Chapter 52, Chapter 52, Big Gourd. On the 3rd day of November, the dark clouds were heavy, and thick snowflakes fluttered down early in the morning. Flakes of snow fluttered down from the sky, quickly covering the earth with a layer of white. Jiang Sanlang and his 2 brothers, their father Old Man Jiang, and 2 nephews, gathered around a bonfire in the new tiled house, warming themselves and talking. Yesterday, the village chief notified everyone that the imperial court demanded grain. For every acre of high-grade land, they demanded 2 pints, and for each acre of low-grade land, 1 pint. Fortunately, we didn't sell our grain, or else. This time, they don't want silver, but only grain. It seems the price of grain will indeed rise this winter. Old Man Jiang sighed, with all these changes, who knows how many people will freeze or starve to death. Jiang Sanlang nodded, thinking that if it weren't for his daughter finding golden ears for them to cultivate, the Jiang family would probably have a hard time. They might not starve to death, but they would inevitably go hungry. Now, looking at his brothers, not only had they built large tiled houses at the same time, but their family members were also dressed in thick cotton clothes and wore cotton shoes with thick soles. The granary was filled with hundreds of pounds of wheat and rice, there was plentiful beans and other cereals, needless to say, they also had a reasonable amount of surplus money. Living all these years, Jiang Sanlang had never felt as comfortable and relaxed as this winter. After the requisition of grain, they might also requisition soldiers. Old Man Jiang's gaze swept over his sons. If they do, our family would definitely be drafted. No problem, we have money. If necessary, we can just buy a substitute soldier. Jiang Sanlang shrugged it off. Jiang Dalong and Jiang Erlang nodded, we don't need to worry about this. From the last batch of golden ears, Jiang Dalong and Jiang Erlang each made 20 taels of silver. After deducting the cost of building the house, they still had 1 or 2 taels left. It was a pity that golden ears did not grow in winter, otherwise, they could fill the newly built bamboo shed with mulberry wood. However, winter had its advantages too. At least they could take a break and relax after a year's hard work. For instance, going hunting. They had decided not to fish anymore because Sanlang said there was no bait to catch fish. But the 3 brothers could go hunting for hares and wild chickens in the snow. They might even catch some roe deer or wild boars. After the snow stops, we brothers can go hunting hares and wild chickens. Jiang Sanlang stirred the fire to make it burn more vigorously. Take some wheat and yellow corn, we can also catch some owls. That would be delightful. Upon hearing this, Jiang Dalong laughed. Right, we can catch owls right at our door. Just scatter some yellow corn and cover it with a basket. At present, only their 3 families had built houses on South Mountain. They had bought the surrounding lower-grade land, so the area was very open. As long as they scattered corn grain outside the courtyard, there would be no shortage of birds to catch. Good idea, good idea. Jiang Cheng and Jiang Quan were thrilled at the idea of catching birds, readily agreeing with their hands raised. They had been assigned by the adults to stay in the new tiled house to look after it, and each day was quite dull and lonely. Now, hearing that they could go outside to catch birds, they were keenly interested. Hee, they could roast the birds they caught directly. If they also smeared some honey, the taste would be exquisite. The old house in Dongchen village belonging to the Jiang family. Now there were only women and children living in the old house. Jiang Lu and her elder daughter-in-law were sitting on the warm Kong bed sewing clothes with her 2 granddaughters. The new year was approaching, so they had to make a new cotton coat for each family member to wear when visiting relatives. Matchmaker Yang from West Village told me today that her niece, who is 20 years old this year, wants to be Erlang's second wife. Jiang Lu twisted the needle and thread in her hand and muttered, but Erlang is absolutely unwilling. That stubborn boy, he makes me so furious. Zhou, I guess Erlang is afraid that marrying too soon will negatively impact his 2 children, that's why he's not willing to. We would be there to supervise, what could go wrong? Jiang Lu sighed, seeing him so lonely every day, with no one to take care of him, makes me feel uncomfortable. Every other family consisted of a husband and wife, sharing all burdens hot or cold. However, her second son had to manage everything alone as a grown man with 2 children, busy running around, even having to wash his own clothes when he came back. Zhou family's sister-in-law refrained from saying more, instead comforting her mother-in-law, "Don't worry, perhaps second uncle hasn't found someone suitable yet." Jiang Lu thought about it, then laughed. That may be true. Since Erlang has built a tiled house and isn't lacking in money, it wouldn't hurt to consider a few more families. This time, she was determined to be more discerning. She absolutely couldn't let Erlang end up with someone like that Leng woman again. At the Zhang's house, Yuan Bao and Huzi were running around playing with Xiaojie and Dao. They ran from the east room to the west room, then from the west room to the east room, laughing and screaming, not staying still for a moment. Ying Bao sat on the Kong bed writing, occasionally glancing at the frolicking devils, shaking her head helplessly. As expected, boys were all mischievous creatures. If a strict teacher didn't constantly guide them, her plan to cultivate a child prodigy might fall through. 2 days later, the snow stopped, revealing a clear azure sky. Early in the morning, Ying Bao collected 17 eggs from the chicken coop, 6 of which were double yolk eggs. She placed the eggs in a grass basket and covered it. These days, the new hens had started laying eggs. By this morning, she had collected 17 eggs at once. She was delighted beyond her expectations. It was worth the effort of painstakingly raising them for over 6 months. These eggs were essentially copper coins. They not only could be bartered for salt and goods but also used as currency. A salesman had come to the village recently. She had exchanged eggs for toothbrushes and toothpaste, as well as 2 packs of salt and a large jar of soybeans. The soybeans were delicious, mixed with sliced white radish, fragrant and crisp, a must-have pickled dish for a rural family in winter. Unfortunately, her mother couldn't make it, and her grandmother's wasn't as good as the one sold by the salesman. After collecting the eggs and feeding the chickens, she refilled Yu's food trough with hay and water, then Ying Bao quickly ran back into the house. It was too cold outside, not suitable for walking the deer, so she decided to stay cozily in her blanket. Luckily, her 2 younger brothers were also not allowed off the bed by their mother, so she could continue to lie down for a while. Last night, she spent half of the night in the cave dwelling, picking 30 mutated golden fungus and laid them out on bamboo trays, 2 full trays. The remaining parts were left to continue to grow. Previously, she had watered the silver fungus several times with the solution of wooding mushroom and pond water. Those were also harvested and laid on another bamboo tray. Furthermore, the gourds she planted before had flowered, fruited and matured, producing dozens of gourds of various sizes, with the largest one taller than herself. Such giant gourds could astonish anyone. So, she decided not to plant gourds again and dared not bring the giant gourds out. She originally thought that she was planting cute petite gourds. She hadn't anticipated that these cute little gourds would turn into something gigantic and not so cute anymore. Ying Bao counted, among these gourds, the biggest ones, about 5 feet tall, numbered around 10. The next largest ones were about her height, around a dozen. The rest were about the size of a household's water scoop. The smallest gourds were roughly the size of her father's palm, only 4 or 5 of them. But those large gourds, though they seemed useless, were actually valuable. In her past life, she had seen one hanging in a liquor store, even smaller than her gourds, used as a sign with a large character, liquor, attached to it. The shopkeeper of the liquor store had said that his large gourd was worth 20 taels of silver. She didn't know if it was true or not. Her gourds were much bigger than the one in the liquor store, so they should be worth at least 20 taels too. If only she could go to the city. Then she could sell these damn things and likely earn a large sum of silver. Chapter 53, Chapter 53, Chapter 53, Cotton. Chapter 53, Chapter 53, Cotton. The seeds that were purchased from the salesman had already sprouted and grown. A whole batch of Chinese chives and a dozen large white cabbages that could be wrapped into hearts. Heart-wrapped cabbages are a northern vegetable, they could be stored for long and are considered a delicacy in small mountain villages. No household in this area ever planted them before. A few months ago, when these vegetables first sprouted, Ying Bao transplanted them to a small patch of field in her own yard. The Chinese chives, having matured, were harvested twice, used for stir-frying with eggs, and they were very delicious. Today, the large cabbages have grown more than 2 feet high. Initially, each plant spread out over a large area. Later, Ing Bao wrapped each of them with straw rope to facilitate them forming hearts. During the recent snowy days, all the large cabbages were chopped down and piled up indoors by Ing Bao. 2 other packets of foreign seeds had also sprouted. There were a dozen cotton trees and a few unidentified vines. The first time Ing Bao saw cotton in her previous life was in the garden of the governor's mansion, where it was planted as ornamental trees. The cotton trees have beautiful flowers and they are pink and bright. As a foreign variety, they were planted in a large area in the mansion garden. Unfortunately, these trees only have a lifespan of 1 year. After the flowers wilted and bore fruit, the branches and leaves withered. Back then, when Ing Bao was relatively free in the mansion, she took an interest in the cotton from the cotton trees, and frequently picked it. In the end, she picked a small basketful. After pulling out the cotton seeds, she used this basket of cotton to make herself a padded jacket. It was only later that she discovered that many aristocratic farms were also planting this kind of cotton tree, and the harvested cotton was very valuable. It could be used for spinning and weaving. Now, her dozen or so cotton trees have bloomed and fruited. The fruits burst open, revealing large clumps of white cotton. Ing Bao picked all the cotton and piled it in a basket, filling a small basket. The withered cotton stalks were uprooted by her for firewood. The cotton seeds were peeled out and planted again. All were planted in the dark soil, and they would probably sprout soon. By next spring, there should be a large amount of cotton seeds in her home. Nowadays, the cultivation of cotton in the Great Qian dynasty is not widespread. Even a decade from now, it will still be limited to a few aristocratic family estates. So at this time, even a few aristocratic families may not have started planting it. Therefore, she must seize the moment and be the first in her family to plant cotton. You must know that most of the linen on the market today is either hemp fabric or kudzu fabric. A small portion is silk and damask that can only be used by the noble and aristocratic, as well as thick velvet fabric woven from various fur fibers such as sheep wool, rabbit hair, and so on. Even though the Jiang family now has quite a bit of silver, the quilts and mattresses are still only filled with some reeds or fluffy straw and hemp, which can barely keep out the cold when laid on top of the body. As for the cotton clothes, the rich fill them with animal hair and duck feathers or directly use animal fur for the coats. Most of the poor still fill the clothes with prickly reeds and hemp. Now that she has had the good fortune to receive the foreign cotton seeds, not planting them would not do justice to the grace of nature bestowed on her. Dong. 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 Attention to all households. The imperial court has decreed that each household with a better piece of land must pay 2 liters of rice. Houses with less fertile land must pay a liter. This must be paid in full within 7 days, violators will be treated as criminals. The village guard, wearing a bamboo hat, repeatedly announced as he hit his gong. He passed each villager's doorstep before moving on to the next village. After the village guard left, the villagers came out of their houses, voicing their complaints. As expected, they are collecting grains again. How are we supposed to live? God, our family only has 200 or 300 jin of grains left. If these are all handed over, our family won't survive. I am going to ask the Lijiang, how are we supposed to live? Several villagers even started crying with their faces covered. Come on, let's go to Chensanyo and see. Only a few days now, and they're gathering grain again. Thus, dozens of villagers reached Chensanyo's home, complaining with all their tongues wagging. Uncle Chen, where do we have any grain in our house? After paying taxes last time, we sold more than half of our grains. Now, we only have a little over 2 measures of rice left, and 7 to 8 mouths in our family rely on this remaining grain for winter survival. Can you not speak to Lijiang and ask if we can make up the shortfall next year? Yes, Sanyo, please just talk to him. We really can't even make it through the day now. Chen Sanyo's head was swelling because of the noise. He impatiently said, Enough, enough. Listen to me. This is an order from the imperial court. What can I, as a lowly village leader, say about it? But you are also working for the imperial court, Uncle Chen, you can't ignore us. Yes, Sanyo, please go and ask Lijiang. If we turn in all the grain, our families will starve to death. Village leader, you cannot neglect whether we live or die. Wah 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 wah, Uncle Chen, please help us. Uncle Chen, only you can talk to Lijiang, can you go and negotiate with him? Everyone was complaining in confusion, making Chen Sanyo feel flustered. With a stern face, he said, "Since you are not happy with me as the village leader, my term ends next year anyway, elect whomever you want." He'd had enough of this torment. With this happening several times annually, Chen Sanyo was worn out and stressed. He was reprimanded by Li Jing if he couldn't collect enough grain tax, cursed by the villagers if he pressed too hard. Alas, he was half in the grave already, why would he bear such agony? The Jiang brothers also heard the cries for grain from the locals, calculating the amount they needed to turn in. They filled up the required quantity with a heavy heart and sent it to town on a cart. Jiang Sanlang had a total of 60 acres of land, 20 of high quality, and 40 of lower quality, which included the Songyu fields in the north and the dryland in South Mountain. Regardless of whether these fields grew grain or not, if your property ledger had recorded this much land, you had to pay taxes according to the acreage. This time, Jiang Sanlang had to give up 80 measures of grain, which equated to nearly 200 pounds. 2 large bags of rice were suddenly cleared from his home storage, causing him agony. And yet, he couldn't resist paying it. In these days, the local officials, responsible for gathering grain, beat gongs and shouted every day. After 5 or 6 days of loud calls, there were still many villagers who could not deliver the grain. The next morning, Sun Liqing led about a dozen local officials to begin collecting from house to house. During the freezing winter, the villagers whose grain was taken away wailed on the snow-covered ground. Some people were beating their chests and stamping their feet in grief. The children were crying loudly, creating a scene of utter misery. Ying Bao, holding Yu, watched this unfold, feeling heavy in her heart. The remaining food of these villagers was taken away. Who knows how they would survive the coming days, or how a whole family could withstand the entire cold winter. One of the households was particularly tragic, with several children, the oldest being only around 12 or 13, and the youngest only 3 or 4. In the last lifetime, the man of this house was forced to go out and cut wood for sale in the snowy weather. As a result, he fell from a slope while carrying the firewood down the mountain, was pierced in the thigh by the bundle of wood, and froze to death on the mountain before being found a few days later. Latterly, the woman of this house also hanged herself, leaving 4 helpless children to wander in the village, begging for food from place to place, and in the end, only the 2 eldest children survived. Seeing a tragedy unfold again, Ying Bao felt a stifling pain in her heart. She returned home dejectedly, locked Yu in the deer pen, and returned to her room to go to the cave to plant more grain. She originally did not want to plant any, because it was too tiring, but today's event startled her, making her realize the importance of rice. No matter when, there should never be a shortage of grain. Starting now, she has to store a large heap of rice and flour in the underground cave to relieve her anxiety. Chapter 54, Chapter 54, Chapter 54, Childhood Friend. Chapter 54, Chapter 54, Childhood Friend. 2 days later, the 3 Jiang brothers returned from hunting in the South Mountain, their backpacks filled with wild chickens and hares. Jiang Sanlang was also carrying a hefty roe deer on his shoulder, attracting a crowd of villagers to come and gawk. At this moment, a skinny man timidly approached Jiang Sanlang and quietly asked, "Sanlang, does your family still need furniture made?" Jiang Sanlang saw that it was his childhood companion Wang Ku and suddenly recalled that Sun Liqing had taken people to collect their grain taxes 2 days ago, and nodded subconsciously, "Yes." Satisfaction spreading across his face, Wang Ku tentatively asked, "Sanlang, I also know carpentry. I made the doors and windows for your house. What if I help your family make furniture?" Jiang Sanlang thought for a second before nodding, "All right." His family needed furniture anyway and the wood had already been bought, it was all stacked up in the new brick and tile house. Wang Ku was so thrilled that he nearly knelt down in front of Jiang Sanlang. "I will start working tomorrow then, all right." Jiang Sanlang patted Wang Ku's shoulder and smiled, "Sure, but I can't pay you much." Hiring a carpenter to make furniture at home meant providing him with 2 meals a day. Hence, without having to deduce Wang Ku's intentions, Jiang Sanlang already understood. However, he was also willing to support his childhood friend, which is why he agreed so readily. "No problem, no problem." Wang Ku waved his hands. Frantically, scratching his head awkwardly, "Just pay whatever you think is suitable." Early the next morning, Wang Ku arrived at South Mountain with his carpentry toolbox and also brought his 2 sons along as helpers. His older son, Wang Dashan, who was 13, was just as dark and thin as him and knew how to measure and trim wood. His younger son, Wang Xiaoshui, who was 9, could run errands and pass things, as well as do some polishing. Jiang Sanlang didn't say much, simply informing Wang Ku of what furniture they needed and their measurements. The kitchen needs a plate cabinet, a grain cabinet, a small dining table, 6 benches, and a pair of water buckets. The hall needs an altar table, a large square table, 4 chairs, and 6 stools. The eastern room needs a dress table, 2 clothes boxes, a clothes rack, and a wooden bed. The western room needs a wooden bed, a desk, 2 chairs, 2 clothes boxes, a bookshelf, and a dress table. That's about it for now. Jiang Sanlang finished in one breath, and then noticed Wang Ku sketching on a piece of paper. Upon a closer look, he had drawn all the furniture Jiang Sanlang mentioned using a charcoal pen. Pointing to his sketches of furniture in each room, Wang Ku said, "I've drawn all the furniture for each room, you check if it's correct." Jiang Sanlang stroked his chin and nodded repeatedly, "Yes, that's right. As for the size, you handle it." Laughing, Wang Ku assured, "Sanlang, don't worry. I'll make sure you're satisfied." This amount of furniture would allow him to work from winter to spring, solving the problem of food for himself and his 2 sons. Come springtime, when Sanlang could settle his wages, no matter the amount, it would help his family get through. Sigh. Afterwards, Wang Ku and his 2 sons moved into the new house in South Mountain and started their diligent work every day, ensuring that each piece of furniture was finely crafted and smooth. Jiang Cheng and Jiang Quan now had company. Besides preparing 2 meals each day, they spent the rest of their time hunting birds and rabbits with little Xiaoshui on South Mountain, providing food for everyone. Occasionally, Jiang Sanlang would also visit, bringing them some grains and vegetables. One day, Yingbao and Yu joined their dad for a trip to South Mountain. Although South Mountain seemed nearby, the winding path to climb up was more than 2 or 3 miles long. After crossing a small stream, they finally reached the mountain. Actually, it wasn't exactly a mountain but rather a high slope. Clusters of wild bamboo forests and patches of farmland filled the slope. Due to the poor soil quality of the fields that made them unfit for wheat, the villagers could only plant millet. The millet was already harvested, leaving only frost-covered mud. The house of the 3 Jiang brothers was built in their permanent field, occupying a broad area surrounded by the inferior lands they had bought. As Yingbao calculated the number of fruit tree saplings in her den, she sat on Yu's back, looking around. 3 terraced brick houses were adorned with large tiles, surrounded by a wall over a man's height, covered with green tiles, tidy and beautiful. The courtyard was large, triple the original size, so much so that one could ride a horse in it. In front of the 3 main rooms was a 5-foot-wide wooden column corridor. An earthen wall with a tile roof was built to the east of the main room. A chicken coop and a deer pen were built on the west side of the courtyard, along with a long bamboo shed which took up most of the western courtyard wall. Jiang Quan poked his head out of the kitchen, seeing his uncle carrying provisions and his young niece riding a deer. He immediately ran towards them. "Uncle, why did you bring Yingbao?" Jiang Sanlang carried grains and vegetables into the kitchen, replying, "I brought your niece to see our new house." Jiang Sanlang carried grains and vegetables into the kitchen, replying, "I brought your niece to see our new house." Jiang Quan burst into laughter, lifted up his cousin from the deer's back, and led her into the room. "It's a good thing you came today, my brother, and I just caught a wild rabbit, it's stewing in the pot now." The main room was filled with wood shavings. A lean man sat on the floor, busy woodworking. 2 teenagers nearby were helping collect the planed wood. Yingbao recognized him at first glance as the man who died on the mountain in her previous life. It seemed that her father had given the men woodworking jobs, so he didn't have to go up to the mountain to cut firewood in the snowy weather, saving him from dying in the mountains. Yingbao felt suddenly uplifted and joyously ran to check out the 2 rooms. The rooms were large and the windows were big. The carved window frame could be pushed outwards, allowing direct sunlight into the room on winter days. There was a bed by the window, with plenty of room left for a small bed and a table. Jiang Sanlang followed to look around. "Yingbao, you will stay in the west room when finished. When your younger brother grows up, Daddy will build another house for them." Yingbao happily touched the new bed, glanced at the already completed desk and dressing table, then grinned. She was moving into her new house, and planned to plant various fruit trees at the front and back of the house. She wanted to have fruits for all 4 seasons, she could pick whatever she wanted to eat, and the surplus could be transported for sale in the town. She also wanted to plant a lot of cotton in the surrounding fields to replace the filling in everyone's cotton jackets with soft fluffy cotton, and use the same cotton for bedding so it's warm and doesn't prick at people. Ingbao, your second brother will take you bird hunting. Jiang Quan stood outside of the window, one hand holding a bamboo screen, and the other holding a bunch of fine hemp rope. I want to see the pond. Ingbao didn't want to hunt birds, she wanted to inspect the surrounding environment and plan where she was going to plant her fruit trees and cotton. What are you hunting birds for? It's almost time for dinner, said her first cousin Jiang Cheng. It was already noontime. Jiang Cheng had steamed several baskets of buns, just waiting for the rabbit meat in the pot to cook. Let's eat, let's eat. As soon as Jiang Quan heard that it was time for dinner, he immediately dropped the bamboo screen and dashed to the kitchen to set the table. Today, Jiang Sanlang not only brought rice and grain, he also brought some turnips and a jar of preserved cabbage for his nephews and the father-son duo, Wang Ko, to eat. In the winter, there weren't many fresh vegetables, so farmers mostly ate preserved salted vegetables. Jiang Qing filled a bowl with shredded turnip, cut up some preserved cabbage, ladled out a basin of cooked rabbit meat from the pot onto the table. There was also a basket of steamed buns made of dark flour, larger than a fist, which was divided into 3 to 4 pieces per person. Because Jiang Sanlang was present today, Wang Ku and his 2 sons sat at the table a little restrained, all too shy to reach out and pick up their chopsticks. Jiang Sanlang didn't say much, just told them to eat more and get full, so they wouldn't delay their work. Chapter 55, Chapter 55, Chapter 55, Outsiders Arrive. Chapter 55, Chapter 55, Outsiders Arrive. After returning from the South Slope, Ingbao faithfully stayed home, spending time teaching her little brother to speak and memorize texts, and visiting the cave dwelling to tend their crops whenever she had a chance. The golden and snow ear mushrooms that she had harvested and sun-dried some time ago were completely dry now and, to her delight, none of them had rotted. She packed them neatly into a bamboo basket. New mushrooms were sprouting from the 10 mulberry trees. The sight of the golden mushrooms and the translucent, white snow ear mushrooms was particularly pleasing to the eye. The cotton seeds she had planted were already sprouting and growing vigorously. In a blink, it was time to celebrate the Kitchen God Festival, when the third eldest of the Jiang family took a break to go to the South Slope again. He instructed Wang Ku and his 2 sons to take a break for the New Year celebrations and to resume work afterwards. He also gave them 5 pecks of wheat and 1 peck of rice as an advance payment for their labor. Wang Ku cheerfully carried the wheat and rice and took his 2 sons back home. They still had 3 mouths to feed at home, and it was likely that the little grains they had left had been eaten up. The grain provided by the youngest Jiang would be a timely supplement, enough to keep his family going until February and March. By then, wild vegetables and ground yams would be sprouting, and elm tree shoots would be available. They could survive on these, preventing them from dying of hunger. By April, the mountain would be covered in pagoda tree flowers, which could fill their bellies. The children would also start catching small fish, shrimp, loaches, and freshwater clams in the ditches, making do until the summer harvest. In this way, his family was able to get by. This was the way in which the poor had been surviving year after year, until they couldn't hold up any longer. In a blink of an eye, the first month of the lunar year was over, and the ice and snow had melted. A new year had begun. As expected, the imperial court issued a conscription order during this time. Many young men from Chuanha town were forced to go to the battlefield. It was the same in Qin village and Shichen village. About 10 men, ages 18 and older, were conscripted each time. Even the Qin family clan leader's family was not spared. His youngest son was conscripted into the army. The conscription was very severe this time. To meet the requirement for troops, private substitution was not allowed. Thus, the clan leader had no choice but to push his youngest son into the army. But no one expected that the old man of the Jiang family would be so cunning. After supplying the required grain, he had divided his son's households at the Lixing's place. In order to get his son's household registrations expedited, the old man Jiang even gave half a caddy of dried golden ear mushrooms to Sun Liqing. Sun Liqing didn't just take his gift for nothing. The next day, he submitted the household registrations to the county government. The advantage of dividing the households was that the county government would not conscript the only male in a household. The disadvantage was that each household had to provide one person for labor service every year. This meant that the three brothers would have to do 10 to 30 days of labor service every year from now on. It was a necessary evil. Doing local labor was better than going to an unknown battlefield to die. The Jiang brothers thus escaped conscription and saved some money that would have otherwise been spent on substitutions. Just after the first month of the lunar year, Sun Liqing, the Lijiang, led people to the Jiangs to reassess their household rankings. In the end, the three Jiang brothers were all designated as second-class households, so from then on, they would have to pay taxes according to second-class households for both the summer and autumn harvests. Jiang Sanlang, the third eldest, was not surprised and gladly accepted this ranking. As soon as spring arrived, he was as busy as a top, hardly having the chance to stop. His daughter was planning to transplant fruit trees on the south slope, so he had to dig pits for the trees first, and then carry chicken manure from the yard to the south slope for fertilizing. Sanlang, some outsiders have moved into our village. His wife, Chunyang, said while kneading dough, they're planning to set up a school for girls. Here. A school for what? He asked, surprised. No wonder the clan school has a new building. He had recently stayed on the south slope, digging pits to plant trees, and his daughter was there helping him as well. Little did he expect that in a few days, a new house would be built next to the clan school for the outsiders. They said it's a school to teach girls medical skills. Having kneaded the dough, Chunyang started to shape the dough into small pieces and roll them into buns. Medical skills. That's not bad. We can let Bao Bao, our daughter, learn too. He replied. His little girl was clever and defied the norms of a typical village girl. If she could learn some useful skills, she would be able to find a better family to marry into in the city. Overhearing their conversation, Bao became curious. There wasn't such a thing as a girls' school in her previous life. She led Yu out, proficiently put a saddle on its back, put on the reins, climbed onto the bench, and then climbed onto the deer's back. She was going to see what the outsiders were like. She noticed that some new houses had been built next to the Qin family clan school at some point, and a big yard was also being constructed. The yard was not fully constructed yet, and several villagers were helping to pile up soil to build the wall. But it seemed that someone had already moved into the house, and there were two finely dressed children standing at the door who clearly weren't villagers. From this distance, Bao couldn't see their faces well, but vaguely sensed that there was a boy and a girl. The girl was slightly older than Ernie, and the boy was about the same size as Yu and Bao. Bao urged Yu to get closer, and noticed that the two children had also seen her and were looking in their direction. A woman in a camel-colored dress walked out of the house. She looked to be in her 30s and was elegant and calm. She also noticed Bao and waved at her. Bao magically hurried the deer towards her. The woman smiled and asked, "Whose child are you?" "I'm from the Jiang Sanlang family." Bao suppressed her excitement, her eyes constantly glancing at the girl on the side. This girl looks like Sister Wen, their eyes and brows were almost identical. But how could Sister Wen end up in this obscure little mountain village? "So, you are from the Jiang Sanlang family." The woman smiled even more gently. She asked softly, "What's your name?" "Bao, my name is Bao." Bao replied loudly. The boy standing on the side stiffened, his face looked a little unpleasant. The woman and the girl both laughed. "So your name is Bao, that's a good name." The woman spoke gently, "Would you like to come down and play for a while?" Bao nodded eagerly. The woman stepped forward, lifted her off the deer, and touched her sheep horn braid with a smile, saying, "Meet my daughter, her name is Wenshu. And my son, his name is Wenhangin." Wenshu. Bao almost screamed. The young lady's real name was indeed Wenshu. Bao's eyes glittered, she stared at Wenshu without blinking, constantly reminding herself, "Don't get too excited, don't expose yourself. There are many people with the same name and surname in this world, she must not misidentify, she must ask slowly and then confirm." Wenshu also smiled at her and went forward to hold Bao's hand. "Bao, how old are you?" Bao raised 3 fingers, 3 years old. "It would be exactly 3 years old in 2 more months. I just turned 9, I'm a rabbit." You're a monkey, right? Yes. Ing Bao nodded hard. Sister One, you guessed right. The boy on the side let out a grunt and mumbled a word. Is this something to guess? Stupid. Ing Bao turned to look at him. He seemed to be around 6 or 7, with a small chubby face, pale and tender. If they gave him 2 pigtails, he would definitely look like a girl. My little brother is 6 years old, he's a snake. Wenshu led her to the side and took a piece of light green cake from the box on the table and handed it to Ing Bao. Try the green bean cake my mother made. Thank you, Sister One. Ing Bao took the cake, ate it in small bites while squinting her eyes. She couldn't help but examine the young girl in front of her. Her eyebrows were like willow leaves, her phoenix eyes and straight nose, and jade lips. Her skin was soft and white. The more Ing Bao looked at her, the more she seemed like Sister One. Sister One, where is your hometown? Why did you come here? Ing Bao asked boldly, using her young age as an excuse. Wenshu smiled. My hometown is far away. My father is weak, and he wanted to find a place with beautiful mountains and rivers to recuperate, so we came here. Ing Bao turned her eyes and asked again, the grandpa one who came here last time is your relative, right? Wenshu nodded. That's my grandfather. He told my father that this place is a good place, suitable for recuperation. Oh. Ing Bao realized. Then, does your family run a pharmacy? Wenshu lowered her eyes and thought for a moment before answering. My family doesn't run a pharmacy, but my father used to work as a doctor. Wen Hangin suddenly snorted from behind, dissatisfied. Are you from the patrol post? Asking so many questions. Ing Bao ignored the little boy's cold words. She hugged Wenshu with a mischievous smile. Sister One, can I be your friend? Yes. Wenshu stroked the little one's head, feeling a trace of warmth in her heart. She spoke softly. From now on, you can come to me to play any time you want. What a cute little girl. She gives a warm feeling, not at all like her cousins. Chapter 56, Chapter 56, Chapter 56, Advancing Studies. Chapter 56, Chapter 56, Advancing Studies. After leaving Sister Wenshu's home, Ing Bao rushed back home with the wind at her heels, hopping and skipping to find her parents. Mrs. Wen said that I will be her first disciple, and she will teach me individually in the future, she said. Hearing this, Jiang Sanlang furrowed his brows. 1. Yes, it's the granddaughter-in-law of the Wen grandfather who visited our village last time. Ing Bao chattered the whole story to her parents. Uncle Wen is frail and needs to recuperate where the mountains are green and the water is clear, so he brought his family here to settle down. Mrs. Wen also said that since her daughter needs to study, why not just set up a girls' school here and teach other girls? Chun Yang smiled and said, that's wonderful, Bao Bao can go there to study, and being taught by a female master is the most appropriate. However, Jiang Sanlang looked grave and pulled his daughter aside, asking in a low voice, Bao Bao, do you really want to study there? Yes, Ing Bao certainly wanted to go. She was sure that Sister Wenshu was the same one as in her previous life. But she was not sure why she had come here in this life. Jiang Sanlang furrowed his brows deeper, and cautiously asked, did the Wen family ask you anything about our ancestral secret recipe? Ing Bao's eyes flickered, and she shook her head, no. That's good, Jiang Sanlang patted his daughter's head. Remember, do not tell anyone about our secret recipe, not a single word. I know, Dad, our family doesn't have any secret medicine, we have nothing. Of course, Ing Bao understood her father's concern. Being an adult in her soul, she wouldn't reveal her secret to others. Jiang Sanlang patted his daughter again, slightly relieved. He turned to his wife, I will have to stay on the south slope for a while, you watch the children at home. His daughter had brought back over 20 seedlings and a large bag of seeds, claiming they were from a cotton variety she bought from a salesman and needed to be planted in the south slope field. So Jiang Sanlang was busy. Not only was he busy planting seedlings, but also turning the land to plant cotton, and the fertile fields at home needed attention as well. Fortunately, the golden ears hadn't started to fruit, otherwise, he would have been stretched too thin. I understand, Chun Yang wasn't worried about anything else, but that the Han family from the West Village would harass her daughter when they least expected it. If she goes to school, we should prepare the proper gifts as well. Even though our daughter is a girl, she should not lack anything when paying respects to her master. I will ask my parents about this, we will prepare all that we need. Chun Yang said, unlocking the box to take out some money to give to her in-laws, hoping they would help prepare the school entering gifts. Her parents-in-law had more experience and knew the appropriate protocols. They knew better than she and her husband about what gifts should be prepared for going to school. Jiang Sanlang nodded, gave Bao a few more instructions, then picked up his hoe and went to the south slope. Jiang Lu was excited when she heard that her third daughter-in-law was sending Bao to the girls' school. She slapped her thigh. Sending one is the same as sending two. Why don't we also send Danny and Ernie to school? Jiang's eldest daughter-in-law didn't object, and asked her own daughter. Danny, why don't you go to school with your cousin for a few days? Danny quickly shook her head. I won't. She was 11 this year, and in a few years, she would be of marriageable age. How embarrassing it would be to stay with a group of young children at school. You are ungrateful. Jiang Lu frowned and glared at her granddaughter. What's wrong with learning a few words? Now that they were not short of money, if her granddaughter learned to read, it would make her future in-laws look upon her with greater respect. Danny hid behind her mother, poking Zhou in the abdomen and whispering. Mom, I won't go to school. If I want to learn words, I can learn from you and Bao. Zhou succumbed and said to her mother-in-law, Danny is already this big, it would not look good for her to go to school. If she wants to learn to read in the future, she can learn from her little brother. Casting an angry glare at her eldest daughter-in-law, Jiang Lu turned and asked Danny, if your big sister won't go, you will go with Bao. Danny nodded, feeling quite pleased, but was also worried about who would look after her younger brother Huzi if she went to school. Grandma, what about Huzi? It was only then that Jiang Lu remembered her mischievous grandson. Let Huzi go too. I don't know if Mr. Wen takes male students. As Huzi was very young, the local school's master was unwilling to accept him, so he had always been hanging around with Bao, Xiaojie, and Dao to play. Let's ask Mr. Wen later if he accepts male students. Spring Mother handed over 2 coins to her mother-in-law. I don't know if this is enough for the courtesy gifts. If it's not, I can go back and get more. Accepting the coins, Jiang Lu said, we don't need so much for one Bao, but we also have to buy ropes for rituals, and with these 2 coins, it should be enough. The next day, Spring Mother sent her 2 sons to the front yard to ask her sister-in-law to look after them. Then she carried the 6 ceremonial gifts in a bamboo basket, leading Bao to meet Mr. Wen for the teaching. Jiang Lu also led Danny and Huzi, carrying double ropes for rituals, to the Wen family. Wen's 4th son was not there. Mistress Wen, Xiao Zhenyang, was arranging the newly renovated school with a maidservant. Mr. Wen, I am here to be a student. Bao called out from a distance. Xiao Zhenyang came out of the house. Seeing it was people from the Jiang family, she hurriedly asked a maidservant to bring stools for Jiang Lu and Spring Mother to sit down. After exchanging pleasantries, Jiang Lu brought up the matter of her young grandson Huzi. Our Huzi is almost 5 years old. He usually plays with his sister and cousin. Now that Danny and Bao are going to school, it's not right to leave him alone at home. I think we should also send him to school to study and play with his sisters. I don't know if Mr. Wen accepts male students here. Xiao Zhenyang laughed. Ordinarily, we don't, although my husband also teaches, but he is only responsible for teaching the children their first characters. If you're thinking about preparing for the imperial examinations, it won't work. The meaning of her words is that her husband's knowledge is limited, only responsible for teaching the children to recognize characters. If they want to sit for the imperial examination, they would need to find another famous teacher. Hearing this, Jiang Lu laughed heartily. He's still a kid. Where does he need to take the imperial examination? Please accept him and casually teach him a few characters. Xiao Zhenyang nodded with a smile. Then let him stay for now. I'll tell my husband later. Ah, that's great. Jiang Lu was overjoyed. Just like that, Bao, Danny, and Huzi all began studying at Wen's school. A few days later, a plaque was hung up at the Wen family schoolhouse, with a few big characters written on it, Aichang Women's Medical Academy. Bao, Danny, and Huzi officially started school the day after the plaque was put up. When they arrived at the school, they found it was only the 3 of them, plus Sister Wen and a boy named Wen Hangin. It was a bit awkward. They initially thought that their teacher would feel shameful due to the lack of students, but after Bao secretly observed for half a day, she found them to be calm and collected, as if nothing had happened. Next, she and Sister Wen had a class together, taught by Mistress Wen. While Wen Hangin, Huzi, and Danny were in another classroom, taught by Mr. Wen with the 1000-character classic. 5 students, divided into 2 classrooms, 1 teacher per student. It was ridiculous. Mistress Wen handed a medical book to Ingbao, and then started the class. Our medical learning is divided into 4 sections: medical science, acupuncture, massage, and incantation. Mistress Wen continued, in the future, we will mainly study medical science, but we also need to learn about acupuncture, massage, and incantations. Part 4 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.